Chapter 1772. Xian really did not understand how was this abnormal. What did this Xiaota mean? Xiaota did not speak again. Xian was speechless. At this time the three outer court elders appeared on the scene. Seeing the three outer court elders, the man in front of Xian suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. In that moment he felt Xian's killing intent. The outer court elder glanced at the man. "Go do what you need to do." The man hurriedly bowed, then turned and ran away. Xian looked at the three outer court elders, not saying a word. The grand elder of the outer clan sized Xian up. "You hid your strength." Xian hurriedly shook his head. "No. I am of the Heaven Ascension boundary." The outer court elder smiled. "You are of the Heaven Ascension boundary, but your battle power far exceeds the Heaven Ascension boundary." Xian said with a smile, "Elder, I'm a straightforward person. Why don't we be frank? Is that okay?" The outer court elder nodded. "Okay." Xian looked straight at the outer court elder. "Why did you accept me into the great spiritual god palace?" The outer court elder smiled. "Because you are monstrous enough." Xian frowned. "That's it." The outer court elder nodded. "I know, you may think that we are after your divine level spring of eternal life, right?" Xian nodded. "I have thought so." The outer court elder smiled. "Don't worry, we are not too interested in your divine level spring of eternal life." Xian was puzzled. "Why?" The outer court elder said, "You can have this thing and dare to expose it. This proves that you are not an ordinary person. Moreover, even if this thing is in the hands of the three of us cannot keep it." Xian smiled. "Then what do you want from me?" The outer court elder said in a deep voice, "Your talent and strength." Xian frowned. "I still don't understand." Meanwhile, Gu Qing suddenly said, "We want you to join the inner court." Xian blinked. "Join the inner sect?" Gu Qing nodded. It has been more than 50 years since anyone from the outer court was able to join the inner court. Now the upper echelons reduce the benefits of the outer court every year. If no one is able to join the inner court, our outer court will really be finished. Xian looked at Gu Qing. "Just because of this?" Gu Qing nodded. "Right here." Xian smiled and said, "What benefits do I get?" "Benefits?" The three of them had strange expressions on their faces. This fellow was asking for benefits. Gu Qing hesitated for a moment before he said, "You'll be able to obtain even more cultivation resources if you join the inner court." Xian smiled and said, "Do you think I lack cultivation resources?" The three of them were speechless. This guy had a divine level spring of eternal life with him, so he definitely wouldn't lack any cultivation resources. Xian suddenly said, "If there are no benefits, then I'm leaving." With that he turned around and left. Actually, he had wanted to leave since a long time ago. He didn't want to be involved in the quarrels of the great spiritual palace. At this moment Gu Qing suddenly said, "Wait." Xian turned around to look at Gu Qing. Gu Qing said solemnly, "Don't you want to see the super geniuses and geniuses of this world?" Xian fell silent. Gu Qing continued, "The inner court is filled with monstrous geniuses. Don't you want to see them?" Xian glanced at Gu Qing. "How monstrous?" Gu Qing smiled and said, "The weakest in the inner court is the mortal severing realm, and they can basically kill mortal severing realm experts from the outside world. The top two can even kill spacetime realms. And the true disciples above the inner court are even more terrifying." Xian asked, "How terrifying?" Gu Qing smiled slightly. "Have you heard of Li Yaoye?" Xian nodded. "It's said that he's the most monstrous genius in the history of the great spiritual palace." Gu Qing nodded slightly. "He reached the minor saint level before the age of 20. And now no one knows what level he has reached. His strength is like the vast starry sky of the universe, unfathomable." At this moment the outer court grand elder also said, "It's not just Li Yaoye. None of the true disciples are weak. They're all monstrous geniuses." As he spoke he looked at Xian. "Are you interested in seeing them?" Xian smiled and said, "Yes." Actually, the reason he came to the ancient god galaxy this time was to see the most monstrous geniuses in this universe. His father had said that there were peak elites of the current realm in this place. Of course he wanted to see them. He had never felt that he was the strongest among the younger generation because he knew that there was always someone better than him. There was no such thing as the strongest, only stronger. Of course, he was not afraid of anyone from the younger generation. Hearing Yi Xian agree, the outer court grand elder and the other two elders all smiled. Although they did not know how strong Yi Xian was, since Yi Xian dared to agree, he must have some tricks up his sleeves. At this moment, the grand elder suddenly smiled and said, "There are 3 months until the inner court assessment. So we only have 3 months. Within these 3 months, we will find a way to help you reach the mortal severing realm." However, Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't cultivate my realm." He didn't cultivate his realm. The three of them were a little confused. Yi Xian smiled and said, "I don't care about my realm." Jilin was about to say something when Gu Qing suddenly said, "Sure." Jilin looked at Gu Qing. Gu Qing smiled and said, "In these 3 months, tell us what you want. As long as it's within our capabilities, we will try our best to satisfy you." Yi Xian nodded. "I need a quiet place to cultivate now." Gu Qing said, "Follow me." As he spoke, he waved his right hand and disappeared with Yi Xian. When they reappeared, the two of them were already in a starry sky. Yi Xian looked around. The starry sky around him was deep and endless. Gu Qing smiled and said, "This is the starry sky cultivation ground that my great spiritual palace has opened up. Each starry sky is a separate space-time starfield. Moreover, they are all dead starfields. You can destroy them however you want to cultivate. Not only that, every cultivation starfield is equipped with a spirit vein. Some of the cultivation starfields of true disciples are even equipped with several sacred-level eternal springs. That kind of cultivation is truly terrifying." Yi Xian said softly, "Impressive. There should be many people who want to become true disciples, right?" Gu Qing nodded. "Super many people. As long as you become a true disciple, you will get unimaginable cultivation resources. As far as I know, becoming a true disciple will not only allow you to cultivate in a starry sky, but you will also have many privileges. For example, they can receive an advance payment of eternal divine crystals from the sect every year. They can also enter the deity martial pavilion to read the cultivation notes of countless experts. Most importantly, they can mobilize a certain number of experts from the sect to serve them. Apart from that, they also have many hidden privileges." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "They can mobilize the experts of the great spiritual palace?" Gu Qing nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian was curious. "How many true disciples are there in total?" Gu Qing said, 6. Yi Xian was stunned. 6? So few? Gu Qing smiled bitterly. "Not everyone can become a true disciple. The difficulty of becoming a true disciple is too terrifying. If you have the chance to come into contact with them in the future, you will know how terrifying it is." True disciple. Yi Xian nodded. In fact, he was also shocked. He realized that he had underestimated the great spiritual palace. As expected of an ancient superforce, this was the real stage. Gu Qing suddenly said, "This is my starry cultivation ground. Although it's not that good, I can make do with it. During this period you can cultivate here. Don't worry, no one will disturb you. However, you must remember that the inner sect assessment is in 3 months. You must come." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." Gu Qing nodded. "I won't disturb you anymore. Cultivate well and call me if you need anything." Having said that, he turned and disappeared. Yi Xian looked around and waved his sleeves. In an instant, 4 time-dimensional rivers appeared in front of him. The current him could already condense 4 time-dimensional rivers. Although it wasn't much, he had slowly grasped some of the core things. This also made him sure that he could do it without limit. Exquisite peak. The great elder of the outer sect looked at Gu Qing. "Did you find out his background?" Gu Qing shook his head. "No." Although he said he was the young lord of Sky Demon Kingdom, the young lord of Sky Demon Kingdom is a woman, so it's not him. As for his name, I don't know if it's a fake name or something. I've never heard of it. Never heard of it. The great elder's face darkened and he didn't say anything. Someone that even the great spiritual palace couldn't find out was not simple. Actually, he didn't know that it was purely because Yi Xian was too far away. At this moment, Jilin suddenly said, "Forget about that. Anyway, he's a member of the great spiritual palace now. Moreover, he's a swordsman. Based on this, we don't need to worry about anything." Swordsmen. Although there were bad swordsmen, they were really rare. Normally, swordsmen were people of good character. After all, as a swordsman, the most important thing was to have a clear conscience and never forget their original intentions. The great elder of the outer sect nodded. That's true. As he spoke, he looked at Jilin. What about Li Shiran? Jilin said in a low voice. He's reached the mortal severing realm. However, his realm isn't very stable, so he's now stabilizing his realm. Mortal severing realm. The great elder of the outer sect nodded slightly. Our outer sect can only send him and this Zhou Xian. Gu Qing said softly, if no one else enters the inner sect this time, then our outer sect. At this point he didn't say anything else. The expressions of the three of them became even more serious. Small grotto heaven. In front of a bamboo house, an old man sat beside a small river. His eyes were slightly closed and he held a fishing rod in his hand. At this moment, a black-robed man suddenly appeared in front of the old man. The black-robed man bowed slightly. Cave Master, we've searched all over the heavens and realms, but we haven't found that plain-dressed lady. After a long silence, the old man said, continue searching. If she's alive, I want to see her. If she's dead, I want to see her corpse. P.S. Working hard to save chapters. I'm so envious of my younger days. At that time I could write at least 5 to 6 chapters a day. Now, sigh. Chapter 1773. The Woman in a Plain Dress. The small grotto heaven had lost 2 super experts this time. A half-step sage and a prospective sage. Li Xianqing was a prospective sage. He was invincible in the space-time realm. It would be too easy for Li Xianqing to become a sage in the future. But now he was killed. Not only was he killed, but his master was also killed. This was equivalent to declaring war on the small grotto heaven. Suddenly, the man in black said, Cave Master, I'm afraid that woman is at least a great sage. At least a sage. The old man was expressionless. So what if she's a great sage? The small grotto heaven was not afraid of a great sage. The small grotto heaven had a great sage-level super expert. Apart from that, the ancestor of the small grotto heaven was related to the supreme law of this universe. With this relationship, even the ancient god galaxy and the sky monster kingdom had to be wary of the small grotto heaven. The supreme law of the universe. Who would not be wary of it? The old man said again, continue to search. We must find her. The man in black nodded. Our people are trying their best to find this person. As he spoke, he paused and said, Yi Xian has already joined the great spiritual god palace. The great spiritual palace. The old man frowned. He joined the great spiritual palace? The man in black nodded. This person has a close relationship with the woman in a plain dress. If we can capture this person, we will definitely know the whereabouts of the woman in a plain dress. However, this person has joined the great spiritual palace, so it's not good for us to capture him. Although the small grotto heaven was not afraid of the great spiritual palace, it was the territory of the great spiritual palace. They did not dare to capture people in the great spiritual palace. This could easily lead to a war. After a long silence, the old man said, He will come out eventually. The man in black nodded. Understood. After saying that, he quietly disappeared. By the river, the old man closed his eyes slowly. Those who offend my small grotto heaven will be killed no matter how far they are. At the cultivation ground in the galaxy, Yi Xian was able to condense 10 time-dimensional rivers. Right now he had already grasped some methods. The most important thing was that time and space had to be combined. The quality and quantity of his time-dimensional river far surpassed what it had been in the past. He had a better understanding of the time-dimensional rivers. And the more he understood, the easier it would be to break. It was worth mentioning that his current sword drawing technique could already be stacked 380 times. He actually wanted to try the sword drawing technique with the mysterious green sword, but he didn't dare to, because even he himself did not know how terrifying that might was. In fact, just the power of the Xianqing sword was already very, very terrifying. He didn't even dare to casually use the profound green sword. This sword was too terrifying. He was afraid that he would be too powerful. Time slowly passed. About 2 months later, Dao Yi suddenly arrived at the starry sky cultivation place where Yi Xian was. Yi Xian stopped and looked at Dao Yi. Dao Yi smiled and said, Let's go out for a walk? Yi Xian blinked. Shall we go out for a walk? Dao Yi nodded. I heard that an inner court elder is going to give a lecture. Are you interested? Xian shook his head. Not interested. Dao Yi rolled his eyes at Xian. Just treat it as keeping me company. Xian smiled. Then I'm interested. Dao Yi shook his head and smiled. He was very happy. The two of them left the starry sky cultivation place and came to a huge training ground. The training ground was nearly 1,000 feet wide and extremely spacious. At that moment, there were many outer court disciples gathered at the training ground. There were hundreds of them. Xian glanced at those outer court disciples and said softly, "These people are all very good." Dao Yi nodded. Those who could become outer court disciples were not weak. In the outside world they would definitely be geniuses among geniuses. Xian suddenly asked, "Dao Yi, where are Ah Ming and the others?" Dao Yi said softly, "They want to stay in the bamboo house by the lake." Xian nodded slightly. "I understand." Obviously, Ah Ming and the others still could not let go of God Yi. Dao Yi glanced at Xian. "They don't hate you. No, they never hated you." Xian smiled. "That's good." Dao Yi was about to speak when a voice suddenly came from afar. "Damn, the backdoor guy is here." Backdoor guy. As soon as these words were spoken, all the outer court disciples present here looked at Xian in succession. Backdoor. When they saw Xian, many of the outer clan disciples revealed looks of disdain. Xian turned to look at Dao Yi. "Did we get in through the back door?" Dao Yi thought about it and said, "They might be talking about you, not me." Xian was speechless. Dao Yi smiled. "Ignore them." Xian nodded. Meanwhile, a man suddenly walked over to Xian and Dao Yi and he gazed at Xian. "You're not worthy of standing with us." Xian said with a smile, "Then get lost." As soon as he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped the man. Slap. The man wasn't even able to react before his figure was blasted flying. In the end, he crashed heavily onto the ground in the distance and the entire ground exploded apart. Everyone was stunned. How could he attack just like that? Xian glanced at the outer court disciples and then he smiled. "Do all of you have any more questions?" The outer court disciples gazed at Xian with a trace of vigilance in their eyes. The man that Xian slapped flying just now wasn't weak, but he didn't even have the ability to fight back. Obviously Xian was strong. Xian smiled and didn't say anything else when they remained silent. Meanwhile, an old man suddenly appeared not too far away from them. The expressions of the outer court disciples changed slightly when they saw the old man, and then they hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Greetings, elder." An elder of the inner court. Xian glanced at the old man. Needless to say, the old man's aura was much stronger than Gu Qing's group of three. The old man didn't even spare a glance at them. He just sat down cross-legged and withdrew an ancient book. The Tao of Martial begins with the ancient gods. The outer court disciples hurriedly sat down and listened attentively. Xian and Dao Yi sat down as well. In the beginning, Xian didn't pay much attention to it, but it didn't take long for him to start listening attentively. Needless to say, the old man's lecture was really good. Especially some of the basic principles of the martial Tao, he explained them in great detail. The outer court disciples listened very attentively as well. Because such an opportunity only came once every 3 months. In the past it used to be once a month. But along with the decline of the outer court, it had been reduced to once every 3 months, and it might be even longer in the future. Around an hour later, the old man suddenly put the book away, stood up and was about to leave. Meanwhile, an outer court disciple spoke abruptly. "Elder, please wait." The old man gazed at that outer court disciple. That outer court disciple bowed slightly. "Elder, there's something I don't understand. You said that the Tao of Martial is distinguished by the divine." The old man suddenly interrupted that outer court disciple, and his expression was cold and indifferent. "These are all basic questions. I don't want to waste too much time answering them." That outer court disciple's expression instantly became quite unsightly when he heard this. Or it should be said that all the outer court disciples here had unsightly expressions as well. The inner court elder seemed like he was giving them alms by coming here to teach them. The inner court elder didn't speak another word, and he just turned around and vanished on the spot. The expressions of all the outer court disciples grew even more unsightly. The old man didn't take them seriously at all. Meanwhile, Gu Qing suddenly appeared here and he glanced at them. "Do you know why he disrespected all of you?" All of them shook their heads. Gu Qing gazed at them. "Because he's from the inner court while all of you are from the outer court. If they weren't on an assignment, then they wouldn't have come to the outer court to teach all of you. One of the outer court disciples spoke solemnly. Elder, we're all from the Great Spirit Divine Palace. Gu Qing gazed at that outer court disciple and said, You're right. We're all from the Great Spirit Divine Palace, but the Great Spirit Divine Palace is divided into the outer court and inner court as well. Moreover, it isn't just the Great Spirit Divine Palace. Only the strong are respected everywhere in the universe. If all of you want to obtain their respect, then enter the inner court. Only by entering the inner court would they respect all of you. Enter the inner court. The expressions of the outer court disciples grew even more unsightly when they heard this, because it was truly too difficult to enter the inner court. Many of them were on the verge of despair. It was even to the extent that they felt that it was utterly impossible. Gu Qing suddenly said, Yi Xian, Li Shiran and Dao Yi stay behind. The rest can disperse. The outer court disciples glanced at each other when they heard this, and then they dispersed. Only Gu Qing, Li Shiran, Yi Xian and Dao Yi remained on the training grounds. Gu Qing glanced at Li Shiran and Yi Xian. Are you confident? Li Shiran replied, 60%. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian asked, Are you talking about joining the inner court? Gu Qing nodded. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Is it really very difficult to join the inner court? Gu Qing nodded. It's extraordinarily difficult. Yi Xian smiled. We'll give it a try when the time comes. Gu Qing glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. All of you will come with me to Glittering Jade Pavilion later. Li Shiran was visibly moved. Glittering Jade Pavilion? Gu Qing nodded. We begged for a long time in order to obtain 3 positions. Yi Xian was suddenly curious. What sort of place is Glittering Jade Pavilion? Li Shiran glanced at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, you don't seem to know anything. Yi Xian smiled. It's my first time here. Li Shiran nodded lightly. Glittering Jade Pavilion is a very special place, and it was established by an elite disciple of our Grand Spiritual Palace. There's a gathering every year, but only the top monstrous geniuses are qualified to participate. Even if you're an inner court disciple, not just anyone can participate. Only those who are invited can participate. Yi Xian asked, What do we do there? Li Shiran smiled. Drink tea, discuss the Tao and make friends with all the geniuses in the world. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Gu Qing smiled. All of you can go see the world. Li Shiran hesitated for a moment and then he said, The 3 of us definitely don't have the qualifications to be invited. Elder you, Gu Qing said with a smile. We shamelessly begged our respective masters for this. All of you must properly cherish this opportunity. If you're able to make friends with some inner court disciples, that would be even better. Yi Xian sighed lightly in his heart. The outer court is really too miserable. Chapter 1774. Outer Court. Yi Xian did not expect the outer court to be so miserable. Although they were all from the Great Spiritual Palace, the outer court did not seem to have any status in the Great Spiritual Palace. Gu Qing suddenly said, Get ready and head to Linlang Pavilion. Li Shiran nodded. All right. With that he glanced at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, Miss Dao Yi, we will meet at the mountain gate later. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Li Shiran turned and left. Yi Xian turned and looked at Gu Qing. Elder Gu Qing, why is the outer court status so low in the Great Spiritual Palace? Is it because the outer court is weak now? But if that's the case, it shouldn't be. The outer court recruits those who have just joined the sect and their strength is weak. This is understandable. Gu Qing smiled bitterly. Actually, it wasn't like this in the past. The main reason is that no one from the outer court passed the inner court assessment and was promoted to inner court disciple. For the past 50 years, there has been a gap between the 2 sides. Therefore, over time the inner court disciples looked down on the outer court disciples. To be precise, the previous generation's demon-like geniuses looked down on the current generation's demon-like geniuses and felt that the current generation's demon-like geniuses are weak. Yi Xian frowned. Why has no one been promoted to the inner court for the past 50 years? Has the assessment become stricter? Gu Qing shook his head. No. Yi Xian was puzzled. Then why is it so miserable? Gu Qing smiled bitterly. We don't know either. We have tried our best to nurture those who have been recruited, but no one has been able to pass the assessment. But now, the benefits of the outer sect were getting fewer and fewer. To the outer sect, it could be said to be one disaster after another. If no one is able to enter the inner court this year, the outer court situation will be even more difficult. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Gu Qing hesitated for a while and asked, Are you confident? Yi Xian smiled. You will know when the time comes. Gu Qing nodded and did not ask any more questions. An hour later, Yi Xian and Dao Yi arrived at the entrance of the mountain. At this moment, Li Shiran was already waiting for them. Li Shiran smiled. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded. The three of them headed for Glittering Jewels Pavilion. Glittering Jewels Pavilion wasn't in Ancient God City, but in a starry sky outside Ancient God City. Li Shiran suddenly said, Brother, you should know very little about Glittering Jewels Pavilion, right? Yi Xian nodded. This is the first time I've heard of it. Li Xiaoran smiled and said, This Linlang Pavilion was built by Miss Xiao Linlang. Brother Yi, do you know Xiao Linlang? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. Li Shiran laughed. Brother Yi, why don't you know anything? Yi Xian smiled and said, This is my first time here. Speaking of which, is this Xiao Linlang very powerful? Li Xiaoran nodded. Very, very powerful. She is a very mysterious girl. When she first joined the outer court, she immediately went to participate in the inner court assessment, and she is the fastest person to pass the inner court assessment. And after entering the inner court, she immediately went to participate in the direct disciple assessment. In the end, she became the fastest person to pass the direct disciple assessment in history. After becoming a direct disciple, she founded Glittering Jewels Pavilion. Only the truly monstrous geniuses are qualified to participate in Glittering Jewels Pavilion. Yi Xian asked, This Glittering Jewels Pavilion is purely for drinking tea and discussing Tao? Li Xiaoran smiled and said, This is a platform because those who are able to enter are definitely geniuses among geniuses, and their family background is definitely not ordinary. Everyone gets to know each other and it is very beneficial for everyone. Other than that, there are many precious martial arts manuals and mental cultivation methods, but you have to take out martial arts manuals and mental cultivation methods of corresponding value to exchange to be able to see them. Other than that, there is also a Tao discussion segment. Everyone can discuss Tao and learn from each other's strengths. In short, if you can enter, you will definitely gain a lot. Yi Xian nodded slightly. I understand. Li Xiaoran hesitated for a while, then said, Actually, the three of us are not qualified to be invited. But Elder Gu and the rest got us 3 invitation letters. Saying that, he looked at the invitation letter in his hand. I even suspect that this is fake. Yi Xian smiled and said, Brother Li, don't belittle yourself. It's not that important whether others think highly of us or not. What's important is that we have to think highly of ourselves. Li Xiaoran smiled slightly. Many thanks for Brother Ye's guidance. But this pressure is really too great. Because everyone inside is a proud son of heaven and I. Yi Xian shook his head. This kind of thinking of yours is very bad. We can be inferior to others, but we can't belittle ourselves. Because if you look down on yourself, how can you expect others to look up to you? Li Xiaoran was silent for a moment, then said, I've learned. Yi Xian smiled and said, Just treat this gathering as an ordinary gathering. After we go in, we will eat and drink as we like. Li Xiaoran was taken aback, then he laughed. Brother Yi, you're really interesting. As they spoke, the three of them had already left the city. Not long after they left the city, Yi Xian frowned. Li Xiaoran also frowned. A long spear appeared in his hand. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly turned around and slashed down with his sword. Following a tearing sound, an afterimage retreated hundreds of feet away. Li Xiaoran was furious. How dare you assassinate someone from the great spiritual god palace? At this moment, the afterimage that Yi Xian slashed away disappeared without a sound. There was no longer any aura around. Since his attack failed, he immediately fled. Yi Xian frowned. Who was it? Was it someone who came to steal the divine-level spring of eternal life, or a small cave? Or the Sky Demon Kingdom? Sky Demon Kingdom was unlikely. The number of people killed by Qing should be enough to deter the Sky Demon Kingdom. As for this small cave, he could not rule out the possibility that the other party was here to seek revenge. At this moment, Li Xiaoran suddenly said, Brother Yi, do you know who it is? Yi Xian shook his head. Forget it. He was a little careless just now. After slashing away with his sword, he did not immediately attack again. In fact, he wanted to keep his life, but he did not expect the other party to be so fast and flee. Li Xiaoran said solemnly, should we return to the great spiritual god palace and inform Elder Gu Qing and the rest? Yi Xian smiled, forget it. I'll deal with it myself. Li Xiaoran hesitated then nodded, all right. Yi Xian said, let's go to Linlang Pavilion. Not long after the three of them left, a black shadow suddenly appeared. After a moment of silence, the black shadow said, he is so strong. So, at this moment, a sword suddenly pierced through his forehead. The black shadow froze on the spot. Yi Xian appeared again, the corner of his mouth raised. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? At this moment, the black shadow suddenly became illusory. Self-destruct. Seeing this, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Self-destruct directly. Yi Xian looked at the shadow. You are from the small cave world. The black shadow's right hand trembled slightly, and this small movement was noticed by Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, you really are from the small cave world. At this moment, the black shadow had completely disappeared. A mortal severing stage assassin. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then shook his head. You are looking down on me too much. With his current strength, let alone a mortal severing stage, he could even kill a spacetime stage. Moreover, he did not even need to use the green profound sword. After a moment, Yi Xian turned and left. Glittering Jewels Pavilion was located in the middle of a lake, and the entire pavilion was built in the middle of the lake. It was very big and very exquisite. The pavilion was built with crystals, and if it was night under the illumination of the starlight and moonlight, the entire pavilion would be even more colorful. It was extremely beautiful, like a celestial palace. When Yi Xian and the other two arrived at the entrance of Glittering Jewels Pavilion, a woman appeared in front of them. The woman wore a white dress and her features were peerless, with a faint smile on her face. The woman smiled faintly. 3 guests, please show me your invitation cards. Yi Xian and the other two took out their invitation. When she saw their invitation, a strange look flashed across the woman's eyes. She did not say much and returned the invitation to the 3, then said with a smile, please enter the pavilion. Li Xiaoran cupped his fists. Thank you. The 3 entered Glittering Jewels Pavilion. After entering, Yi Xian and the other two were a little surprised. Glittering Jewels Pavilion was different from the outside. The decorations inside Glittering Jewels Pavilion were very simple and not luxurious at all. Compared to the outside, it was a world of difference. At this moment, Li Xiaoran suddenly laughed. I wonder if Miss Linlang will come this time. And that Li Yaoye. Yi Xian looked at Li Xiaoran. Didn't Miss Linlang come to previous gatherings? Li Xiaoran laughed. Not necessarily. Sometimes she will appear but sometimes she won't. Yi Xian nodded slightly and he looked around. The entire pavilion was very spacious, and in the center of the pavilion, there was a huge round platform, and around the round platform were some praying mats. Li Xiaoran said, this should be the place where the Tao discussion will be held later. As he spoke, he looked into the distance. Let's go to the cabinet. I heard that there are many display platforms in the cabinet. Yi Xian nodded. All right. The 3 arrived at the cabinet, which was relatively small. Inside the pavilion there were about 100 crystal display platforms, and inside there were divine items and some scrolls. Li Xiaoran suddenly walked in front of a crystal platform, and his expression suddenly turned solemn. Ancient Desolation Fist. Yi Xian walked to Li Xiaoran's side and he took a glance at the crystal platform, and at the bottom of the crystal platform, there were 3 big words. Ancient Desolation Fist. Yi Xian looked at Li Xiaoran, and Li Xiaoran said in a deep voice, it's a sacred rank martial technique. Yi Xian frowned. Sacred rank. Li Xiaoran nodded. Martial techniques are divided into 5 types from low to high. They are void rank, truth rank, sacred rank, god rank and ancient god rank. Sacred rank martial techniques and mental cultivation methods, even in the great spiritual god palace, are very precious. Only a few core disciples of the inner sect are qualified to learn them. Yi Xian nodded slightly and he looked around. Finally, he came to the crystal pillar in the center, but just as he was about to approach, he was blocked by an invisible force. There's a formation. Yi Xian took a glance at the crystal pillar, and at the bottom there were 2 big words. Sword extinction. Sword technique. Moreover, it was a god rank sword technique. Yi Xian was instantly interested. Yi Xian turned his head to look at Li Xiaoran and said with a smile, Brother Li, how do I obtain this god rank sword technique? Li Shiran took a look at the crystal platform in front of Yi Xian, and then smiled bitterly. Brother Yi, I'm afraid you can't afford this. To obtain this item, you must exchange it with a sword technique of the same level. Yi Xian was about to speak when at this time, a voice suddenly sounded from the side. Heaven Ascension Stage? Yi Xian turned to look, and not far away, a man was looking at him. The man looked at Yi Xian, his brows slightly wrinkled. A Heaven Ascension Stage can also enter Glittering Jewels Pavilion? What a joke. Yi Xian was about to speak when at this time the man suddenly said, Your outer sect disciples. Outer sect disciples. Yi Xian nodded, yes. The man stared at Yi Xian. You don't have the qualifications to be invited. As he spoke, a cold light flashed in his eyes. How dare you dare to forge an invitation letter. P.S. Regarding updates, I have a great plan. Chapter 1775. Forged Invitation Letters. His words immediately attracted the attention of some people in Glittering Jewels Pavilion. Yi Xian glanced at the man. This man was also from the Great Spiritual Divine Palace. However, he was obviously from the inner court. At this moment, a woman slowly walked into the inner court. It was the woman who had received Yi Xian's group earlier. The man quickly said, Miss RMO came at the right time. These 3 forged invitation letters to sneak into Glittering Jewels Pavilion. They deserve to die. RMO glanced at the man. Young Master Wang Xiu, they forged invitation letters? The man named Wang Xiu nodded. Yes. They are all outer court disciples of Great Spiritual God Palace. They are not qualified to enter Glittering Jewels Pavilion. Their invitation letters must be forged. RMO looked at Yi Xian's group. Yi Xian looked at Wang Xiu and smiled. Brother Wang, we are all from Great Spiritual God Palace. Why do you have to do this? Wang Xiu flicked his sleeves and a trace of disdain flashed in his eyes. Your outer court is a disgrace. Do you think you are from Great Spiritual God Palace? Yi Xian suddenly asked. Not from Great Spiritual God Palace? Then what is it? Could it be from Battle Pavilion? Wang Xiu's expression froze. Yi Xian said seriously, Brother Wang, your thinking is dangerous. You don't even admit that the outer court belongs to Great Spiritual God Palace. Wang Xiu stared at Yi Xian and mocked. What? Are you outer court disciples only good at talking? Yi Xian said with a smile. I think both the inner and outer sects belong to the Great Spiritual Divine Palace. Well said. At this moment a man suddenly applauded. Well said, sir. Yi Xian looked at the man and the man smiled. I am an inner court disciple Mo Yi. Yi Xian smiled. Hello, Brother Mo. Mo Yi smiled and looked at Wang Xiu. Brother Wang, regardless of whether they are outer disciples or inner disciples, they are all from the Great Spiritual Palace. Since they are all from the Great Spiritual Palace, let's forget about this matter. Wang Xiu sneered. Forget it? Mo Yi, I admit that the outer sect is also part of the Great Spiritual God Palace, but forgive me for being blunt. Do the 2 of them have the qualifications to enter the Glittering Jewels Pavilion? Yi Xian smiled and said, Is it up to you to decide whether I'm qualified or not? Wang Xiu stared at Yi Xian. Outer sect, you're so arrogant. Yi Xian blinked and said with a smile, This is arrogance? Meanwhile, Li Xiuran, who stood by Yi Xian's side, hesitated for a moment before he said, Senior Brother Yi Xian, we didn't forge any invitations. Our invitations were sent by Master. As soon as these words were spoken, an uproar arose in the surroundings. Yi Xian also shook his head and sighed. This Brother Li's brain was still a little too simple. The 3 of their invitation letters were originally a little unorthodox. After all, the exquisite Jade Pavilion did not invite the 3 of them. And who was the one checking the invitation cards outside? It was none other than Miss Im. Wang Xiu still dared to say that their invitations were forged after seeing Miss Imo. He was either an idiot or had ulterior motives. Meanwhile, Wang Xiu suddenly smiled and said, So it was your master who asked for it on your behalf. I understand. Li Xiuran instantly became slightly embarrassed when he heard this. On the other hand, the expressions of the others here became slightly strange as well. Actually, it wasn't that something like this had never happened before. For the sake of creating opportunities for their descendants, the older generation would use their connections to obtain an invitation card and then give it to their descendants. However, such things were tacitly understood. At this moment, Wang Xiu had directly brought this matter out in the open, and he was intentionally humiliating Yi Xian's group of 3. Wang Xiu suddenly gazed at Yi Xian and said, "You're at the Heaven Ascension realm. If I'm not wrong, then you're Yi Xian who just joined the outer court, right?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "That's me." Wang Xiu smiled and said, "So you're Yi Xian who entered the outer court from the back." As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings and continued, "All of you might not be aware, but he originally didn't have the qualifications to join the outer court. However, he used his connections to enter the outer court. I'm not humiliating a fellow disciple for no reason today, but I, Wang Xiu, can't bear the sight of people who use their connections to enter the outer court." Some people gazed at Yi Xian with slightly strange gazes when they heard this. He entered the outer court through the back door. Mo Yi glanced at Yi Xian and he hesitated for a moment but didn't say anything in the end. Actually, he'd heard about what happened to Yi Xian as well. It seemed like he really did enter through the back door. Such behavior was quite shameful. Meanwhile, Li Xiuran suddenly spoke in a low voice. "Wang Xiu, with Brother Ye's strength, he's completely qualified to enter the outer court. He didn't enter through the back door at all. He'd seen Yi Xian fight earlier, so he was aware of Yi Xian's strength." Wang Xiu smiled and said, "He didn't enter through the back door? Then tell me, a Heaven Ascension realm cultivator like him was actually able to join the outer court?" As he spoke, he shook his head and smiled. "No wonder your outer court has declined to such an extent. So it turns out that your outer court has become so corrupt. Truly shameful." Li Xiuran was slightly furious. He wanted to say something but was stopped by Yi Xian. Li Xiuran looked at Yi Xian and Yi Xian smiled and said, "Brother Li, let me deal with such a person." As he spoke, he looked at Wang Xiu and smiled. "So, your main objective today was to target me?" Wang Xiu gazed at Yi Xian. "You don't have the qualifications for me to target you. I purely dislike the sight of you." As he spoke, he smiled lightly. "If you dislike the sight of me as well, then come and hit me." Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Before the crowd could react, they only saw a flash of sword light and Wang Xiu's head directly flew off. A stream of fresh blood splattered out. Everyone present was dumbfounded. Yi Xian attacked. He actually attacked in the Glittering Jewels Pavilion. One had to know that fighting was prohibited in the Glittering Jewels Pavilion. And the reason why Wang Xiu deliberately said those words just now was to deliberately provoke Yi Xian to attack. It was very scheming. But they didn't expect that Yi Xian would really attack. What they didn't expect even more was that Yi Xian directly killed Wang Xiu. This Wang Xiu was at the mortal severing realm. And he was considered to be above average in the inner court. And he was killed just like that. Some of the inner court disciples of the great spiritual god palace looked at Yi Xian with an additional trace of fear in their eyes. And at this moment Wang Xiu was actually not completely dead. His physical body had been slashed away by Yi Xian, but his soul was still there. However, a strand of sword light had locked onto his soul. At this moment Wang Xiu's eyes were filled with terror. Actually, he'd been prepared to attack Yi Xian at any moment. But at the instant that Yi Xian had attacked, he hadn't been able to block it. He hadn't even been able to resist a single strike. Meanwhile, Miss Imo suddenly looked at Yi Xian, and her gaze gradually turned cold. She was just about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly issued a command in his heart. Bang! Wang Xiu's soul transformed into nothingness and even his consciousness was wiped out. Completely gone. Imo stared fixedly at Yi Xian when she saw this scene. "Young Master Yi, you can't attack in the Glittering Jewels Pavilion." Yi Xian blinked. "Can't I attack?" Imo gazed at Yi Xian with an icy cold gaze. Yi Xian smiled embarrassedly. "I'm sorry. It's my first time here so I don't know the rules. Please forgive me, miss." Imo was slightly speechless. This fellow's apologetic attitude wasn't bad, and she didn't know what to do for a moment. Meanwhile, an inner court disciple suddenly said, "Yi Xian, you're too ruthless." Yi Xian looked at that inner court disciple and was slightly puzzled. "He was the one who asked me to hit him. All of you heard that, right? He was the one who asked me to hit him." Everyone was speechless. Yi Xian said seriously, "In my entire life this is the first time someone has asked me to hit him. Really?" That inner court disciple glared angrily at Yi Xian. "You?" Yi Xian suddenly looked at that inner court disciple. "Do you want me to hit you as well?" That inner court disciple's expression instantly changed when he heard this. He was extremely fearful of Yi Xian's strike from before, because he didn't have the confidence to receive it. At this moment the atmosphere suddenly became slightly awkward. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Everyone, let's get back to the topic at hand. Wang Xiu slandered me by going through the back door." As he spoke he grinned, "I'm sure all of you know whether I did or not. As for Wang Xiu, all of you saw him just now. First he humiliated me, then he asked me to hit him. Alas, it's truly the first time I, Yi Xian, have heard such a request in my entire life. It's true." All of them were speechless. Suddenly, laughter resounded from outside. "You killed him, yet you still want to destroy his heart. How interesting." As soon as the voice resounded, a man walked in. Someone exclaimed with surprise as soon as the man walked in, "The sixth on the earth rankings, Zhou Xian. The earth rankings of the inner court." Li Shiran spoke solemnly by Yi Xian's side. "Brother Yi, there's a ranking in the inner court, the earth rankings. Anyone who's able to enter the earth rankings is a genius amongst geniuses. You have to be careful." Yi Xian smiled, "All right." After Zhou Xian walked in, some of the inner court disciples hurriedly cupped their fists and greeted him. Zhou Xian smiled and returned the greeting. In the end he gazed at Yi Xian. "You're that fellow Yi Xian?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." Zhou Xian gazed at Yi Xian. "We're all from the same sect, yet you actually acted so ruthlessly. You didn't just kill him, you even wiped out his soul and consciousness. Aren't you a little too ruthless?" Yi Xian said, "He asked me to hit him." Zhou Xian stared at Yi Xian. "Don't play such lowly tricks. You didn't just break the rules of Glittering Jade Pavilion by killing him, you broke the rules of the sect as well. Even if you're able to leave here today, the law enforcers of the sect won't let you go." As he spoke he gazed at Miss Mo. "He openly killed someone in Glittering Jade Pavilion. He doesn't take Glittering Jade Pavilion seriously at all. Could it be that your Glittering Jade Pavilion will just sit idly by and do nothing? If you do, then may I ask Miss Mo, who will still abide by the rules of Glittering Jade Pavilion in the future? Moreover, where will Miss Glittering Jade Pavilion's face go?" Mo's face was slightly gloomy. Suddenly Yi Xian said, "Tiski, you actually joined forces with outsiders to deal with your own?" Zhou Xian gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was slightly heartbroken. "We're from Great Spirit Palace. We're brothers. Even if there's a conflict between us, it's an internal matter of our Great Spirit Palace. Yet now you've actually joined forces with Glittering Jade Pavilion to deal with me. Aren't you being a traitor?" Zhou Xian was speechless. Chapter 1776. Everyone within Glittering Jade Pavilion gazed at Yi Xian with rather strange expressions on their faces. Isn't this fellow a little too talkative? While Yi Xian seemed to be pestering endlessly, there was actually a certain level of logic behind it. Even though Glittering Jade Pavilion was created by the geniuses of Grand Spirit Palace, it didn't belong to Grand Spirit Palace in the end. At this moment, it was actually inappropriate for Zhou Xian to ask Glittering Jade Pavilion to deal with Yi Xian. Just as Yi Xian had said, no matter how fierce the internal strife of Grand Spirit Palace was, it was an internal matter, and it shouldn't have joined forces with outsiders. That was actually a huge taboo. Zhou Xian gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. "I underestimated you." Yi Xian smiled. "Actually, I really don't understand. We're both from Grand Spirit Palace, so why does your inner court look down on the outer court so much?" Zhou Xian shook his head. "We're not talking about the inner court and outer court right now. We're talking about how you killed Wang Xiu. Even you said that they're both from Grand Spirit Palace. Since it's like that, then why did you kill him?" Yi Xian said with a smile. "Who started it?" Zhou Xian stared at Yi Xian. "It was just a verbal argument between you, yet you directly killed him. Moreover, it was a surprise attack. Moreover, you acted so ruthlessly and even wiped out his soul and consciousness. Did you even take him to be a fellow disciple of the same sect?" Yi Xian chuckled and said, "He targeted me as soon as he arrived. Obviously, he didn't take me to be a fellow disciple of the same sect. Since it's like that, why should I take him to be a fellow disciple? This respect is mutual, isn't it?" Zhou Xian smiled. "It's a fact that you killed him." Yi Xian blinked. "If that's what you want to say, then I can only say that I killed him. So I killed him. Give me another chance and I'll kill him again." As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere here instantly became tense. Su Yan gazed at Yi Xian. Are you declaring war on my inner court? Yi Xian said with a smile. I don't have too many thoughts about the inner court. However, my character is that I will fight whoever comes looking for trouble with me. As he spoke, he walked over to Su Yan. I heard you're the 6th on the Earth rankings. Do you want to spar with me? Because I don't think there's much meaning in a war of words. Challenge. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone present here was shocked. An outer sect disciple challenging an inner sect disciple? Furthermore, it was the Heaven Ascension boundary challenging the absolute spacetime boundary. He was challenging a genius on the Earth ranking who was 2 ranks higher than him. This was a little exaggerated. Su Yan looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, there was a trace of seriousness in the depths of his eyes. Yi Xian smiled and said, Fight? The kind where life and death are decided. Meanwhile, Mo said abruptly, This is Glittering Jade Pavilion. Linlang Pavilion. Yi Xian roared with laughter. He glanced at the inner court disciples and smiled. I'm an outer court disciple. If all of you can't stand the sight of me, then feel free to target me. Yi Xian requests to be targeted. Please target me. How arrogant. The expressions of the inner court disciples became unsightly. It was an undisguised provocation. Meanwhile, Su Yan suddenly said, I accept your challenge. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone gazed at Su Yan. Actually, they weren't surprised. Su Yan was an inner court disciple and he was a top-rate expert on the Earth rankings. If he didn't accept Yi Xian's challenge, then how would he continue living in the inner court in the future? After all, Yi Xian wasn't an outer court disciple, and he was only at the Heaven Ascension realm. So he had to accept this challenge. Yi Xian gazed at Su Yan and the latter smiled. Glittering Jade Pavilion isn't suitable for battle. Let's go somewhere else, alright? Yi Xian nodded. Alright. Su Yan said, Let's go to the Starry Sky battlefield. As soon as he finished speaking, a teleportation formation suddenly appeared beneath his and Yi Xian's feet, and then they vanished on the spot. As for the others in Glittering Jade Pavilion, they vanished as well. In the deathly silent starry sky, Yi Xian and Su Yan faced each other from afar. The inner court disciples and some geniuses and monstrous geniuses that Glittering Jade Pavilion had invited were standing around them. There were even people from the battle pavilion. The news of their battle spread quickly, so more and more inner court disciples and monstrous geniuses rushed to this starry sky. Miss Amo was there too. A young man followed behind her and there was a small, battle character carved on his left chest. Battle Pavilion. The young man looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Is this the Yi Xian who entered the great spiritual god palace through the back door? Amo shook her head slightly. Brother Gushi, you're wrong. With his strength, not to mention being an outer court disciple, he's even qualified to be an inner court disciple. Gushi was slightly interested. This person dares to challenge a spacetime realm cultivator when he's only at the Heaven Ascension realm, so he must be extraordinary. I just don't know how extraordinary he is. Amo smiled. We'll find out soon. In the distance, Su Yan suddenly said, A life and death battle? Yi Xian smiled. Of course. Su Yan gazed at Yi Xian. All right. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. Can we begin? Su Yan nodded. He just nodded when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. All the spectators saw a ray of light flash. Su Yan's expression instantly changed drastically, and then he swiftly pressed his palms together. In an instant, a ray of golden light converged in front of him. There was a river of time within the ray of golden light. It was a material river of time. A spacetime realm cultivator. A true spacetime realm cultivator. He'd chosen to defend against Yi Xian's attack. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword arrived before him. Yi Xian's attack stabbed against the ray of golden light. Everyone watched as the ray of golden light shook violently, and then it exploded apart. At the same time, Su Yan retreated explosively. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword flew forward again. In the distance, Su Yan's pupils constricted. How could he possibly resist this attack? Suddenly, an old man appeared in front of Su Yan and then he flicked his sleeve. Bang! Yi Xian's attack was instantly stopped. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the sword flew back into his grasp before he gazed at the old man. The expressions of the inner court disciples changed slightly when they saw the old man, and then they bowed slightly. Greetings, Elder Qiu. Elder Qiu. An inner court elder. Elder Qiu gazed coldly at Yi Xian. It was just a spar, yet you attacked so viciously. How vicious of you. Yi Xian chuckled. We agreed that it would be a life-and-death battle. As he spoke, he gazed at Zhou Xian. What? You even called for help. Zhou Xian's expression was quite unsightly when he heard this. Only now did he realize that he'd really underestimated this fellow. That attack just now had almost taken his life. Elder Qiu's eyes suddenly narrowed slightly and his gaze was icy cold. You're an outer court disciple. Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Elder Qiu was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, Elder, the battle between us hasn't ended. Can you move aside for now? As soon as these words were spoken, all the spectators here were shocked. He's not even giving face to an inner court elder. Isn't he too amazing? Amo gazed at Yi Xian as well and she was quite shocked in her heart. This fellow is actually refusing to stop? After all, in Yi Xian's opinion, if he were to immediately apologize to this inner court elder, then perhaps the inner court elder would give him a way out and let the matter rest. However, she hadn't imagined that Yi Xian would actually refuse to give face to this inner court elder at all. Has he gone mad? Elder Qiu just stared at Yi Xian. You've won. Do you really have to kill me? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. You make it sound like I'm the one in the wrong. As he spoke, he pointed at Zhou Xian. How did he act against me just now? I want an explanation. Is there a problem? Elder Qiu gazed at Yi Xian while a trace of killing intent flashed through his eyes. Let the matter rest. Understand? A savage smile arose on the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. Let the matter rest? Who the fuck do you think you are? Elder Qiu's eyes narrowed slightly. How dare you? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward. As soon as he took a step forward, he drew out his sword and slashed. At the instant that his sword slashed, bang! An expanse of light suddenly erupted. Rumble. The spectators watched with astonishment as Elder Qiu was blasted over 10 kilometers away. At the same time, the entire expanse of the starry sky started to be obliterated bit by bit. The spectators in the surroundings were horrified and they retreated explosively. At this moment, all of them were shocked. No one had expected Yi Xian's attack to be so terrifying. Yi Xian glanced at his hand and he noticed that it was empty. He'd used the sword drawing technique just now. It was a pure drawing technique and it wasn't a technique that decided life and death. Even then, his sword hadn't been able to endure the force of the sword drawing technique because he hadn't used the green profound sword. Suddenly, Elder Qiu spoke with astonishment. Your sword technique. At this moment, only his soul remained. His physical body had been slashed into pieces by Yi Xian. Suddenly, Yi Xian vanished on the spot. Zhou Yan's expression changed drastically, and he was about to attack when a sword pierced through the center of his forehead. Bang! Before everyone's eyes, Zhou Yan was forcefully erased. His soul was obliterated. At this moment, this expanse of the starry sky that was being obliterated fell completely silent. He'd killed him. However, this wasn't the end of it. Yi Xian turned around to gaze at Elder Qiu, and his expression changed drastically. Do you dare to kill the old man? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. Why wouldn't I? As he spoke, he was about to attack. Meanwhile, Li Shiran suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and he hurriedly stopped Yi Xian. Brother Yi, you absolutely can't kill an elder. Killing an elder is a crime punishable by death. Yi Xian blinked. Is it a huge crime to kill an elder? Li Shiran hurriedly nodded. Extremely. Killing an elder is equivalent to provoking the enforcement hall, and they won't let you off. There's still room for negotiation now, but if you kill an elder, then there'll be no room for negotiation at all. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, but will he take revenge on me in the future? Li Shiran hesitated for a moment and said, he might. Yi Xian frowned when he heard this, and then the sword in his hand suddenly started trembling. Li Shiran's expression instantly changed drastically and he hurriedly said, he might not as well. As he spoke, he gazed at Elder Qiu. Elder Qiu, you won't take revenge on Brother Yi, right? Elder Qiu stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Would he dare to kill the old man? Even if I gave him 100 guts, he would still. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly swung his sword. Elder Qiu was instantly annihilated. Li Shiran's face instantly turned pale when he witnessed this scene. We're finished. P.S. I've always had a plan. Chapter 1777. He killed him. The expressions of everyone here had become solemn when they witnessed this scene. As for the inner court disciples, their faces were covered in disbelief. He killed an elder of the inner court. Xian actually dared to kill an elder of the inner court. That was an elder of the inner court. Killing an elder of the inner court wasn't as simple as breaking the rules of the palace. Only the enforcement hall had the authority to deal with an elder who broke the law. However, Xian had bypassed the enforcement hall and killed an elder, so it was equivalent to provoking the enforcement hall and the Great Spirit Palace. Of course, most importantly, Xian had actually been able to kill an elder of the inner court, and he'd done it with such ease. His strength was truly terrifying. Suddenly, a black-clothed old man appeared not too far away from Xian. There was a tiny Yi character inscribed on the old man's left chest. An enforcement officer. Li Shiran's face instantly turned pale when he saw the black-clothed old man. The enforcement officer is here. The black-clothed old man glanced at the spot where Elder Qiu had vanished, and then he gazed at Xian. You killed him? Xian nodded. The black-clothed old man gazed at Xian. Are you coming with me or do I have to take you with me? Xian smiled. I'm not leaving. The black-clothed old man's eyes narrowed slightly. He opened his palm and then a black chain suddenly appeared in his palm. In the next moment the black chain flew forward. The sound of something tearing resounded. Meanwhile, Xian suddenly charged forward and slashed with his sword. Bang! An expanse of light suddenly erupted. In the next moment the black-clothed old man was pushed over 3 kilometers back, and he just stopped when the chain in his hand shattered into pieces. Everyone was stunned once more. Even the enforcement elder isn't a match for him? The black-clothed old man was quite stunned. I was actually pushed back by that attack. Xian gazed at the black-clothed old man. You might not be able to take me with you. The black-clothed old man spoke furiously. How dare you? Are you trying to rebel? Xian opened his palm and a sword appeared in his hand. He then slowly walked towards the black-robed old man. Boom! A powerful sword aura enveloped the black-robed old man. The black-clothed old man's expression changed drastically. The man in front of him wanted to kill him. Right at this moment, Elder Gu Qing suddenly appeared before Xian, and Gu Qing hurriedly said, Don't act recklessly. In fact, he was also very shocked at this moment. He knew that Xian had been concealing his strength, but he never expected Xian's strength to be so terrifying. Not only did he kill Su Yan of the Earth Roll, but he also killed an inner elder. Even the law enforcement elder was no match for him. This was too terrifying. Xian thought for a moment and said, He wants to take me away. Gu Qing said in a low voice, I'll handle it. Xian nodded. All right. Gu Qing instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. Since Xian was willing to listen to him, it proved that Xian had never intended to betray the Great Spirit Palace. So he could still be saved. Gu Qing turned around to look at the law enforcement elder. Elder, he's the most monstrous genius amongst our outer court disciples. The law enforcement elder suddenly interrupted Gu Qing. He killed an inner court disciple and an inner court elder. This is a monstrous crime and he must die. Xian suddenly said, Trust me, I'll kill you. The law enforcement elder spoke ferociously. Don't you dare. Xian suddenly laughed. I even dared to kill an inner court elder, so why wouldn't I dare to kill you? As he spoke, he was about to attack. Meanwhile, Gu Qing hurriedly stopped him and laughed bitterly. Don't be impulsive. Killing him is equivalent to poking a hornet's nest. None of those fellows from the enforcement hall are easy to deal with. Xian was about to speak when the law enforcement elder spoke abruptly. Let him kill me. Let's see if he dares to touch me, old man. Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. The law enforcement elder's voice stopped abruptly. There was a sword stuck in the center of his forehead. Gu Qing's face turned pale when he witnessed this scene. We're finished. That fellow even dared to kill the law enforcement elder. We've poked a hornet's nest. The inner court disciples had extremely solemn expressions on their faces as well. It was too terrifying. Has he gone mad? He dares to kill on sight. The problem is that he can still kill. Is the law enforcement elder that weak? Gu Qing laughed bitterly. We're finished. Xian smiled. It's not finished. Gu Qing gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned. The more I kill, the greater my chances of survival. Gu Qing frowned slightly and he was slightly puzzled. Suddenly, a strand of formidable pressure appeared here. The expressions of everyone here changed when they sensed this pressure. It was the aura of a minor saint. A true saint. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly as well. I probably can't kill this newcomer with a single strike of my sword. Meanwhile, a white-haired old man suddenly appeared not too far away from Yi Xian. Gu Qing hurriedly bowed respectfully when he saw the old man. Greetings, Elder Heng. The other inner court disciples hurriedly bowed respectfully as well. Heng. That was the grand elder of the inner court, and he was one of the strongest and most senior elders in the inner court. Heng's gaze descended onto Yi Xian. You killed someone. Yi Xian nodded. I did. Heng asked, why? Yi Xian smiled. I can't stand the sight of them. I can't stand the sight of them. As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of everyone here became strange. Damn it. This fellow is too arrogant. When did such a freak appear in the outer court? The white-robed old man stared at Yi Xian. You killed them because you can't stand the sight of them. But what if you can't stand the sight of me? Will you kill me as well? Yi Xian shook his head. I won't. The white-robed old man frowned slightly. Why? Yi Xian smiled. Because I don't offend those who don't offend me. The white-robed old man was stunned and then he said, They offended you so you killed them? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Heng stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Your actions are too extreme. Right and wrong are determined by the rules of the palace. How could you? Yi Xian suddenly shook his head. Elder, is right and wrong really important to all of you? The white-robed old man gazed at Yi Xian. What do you mean? Yi Xian smiled. Wang Xiu insulted me and my outer court disciple, so why can't I kill him? The white-robed old man laughed. Wang Xiu was in the wrong for insulting you, but you don't have the right to kill him. Yi Xian looked the white-robed old man in the eyes. Elder, I'm a swordsman. A swordsman. The white-robed old man's eyes narrowed slightly. Swordsmen were a group of stubborn and bad-tempered people, so most people weren't willing to offend a swordsman. Even the members of the battle pavilion wouldn't offend a swordsman for no reason. The white-robed old man suddenly said, Then the inner court elder and Su Yan. Yi Xian suddenly said, Elder, I've already killed them. It's meaningless to say anything else. You can do whatever you want. In any case, it doesn't matter to me. If I can win, then I'll fight. If I can't, then I'll die. It's very simple. The crowd was speechless. The white-robed old man stared at Yi Xian for a long time, then nodded. You've got guts. Yi Xian shrugged. I don't bully people, but I'll kill anyone who dares to bully me. What a joke. At this moment, an angry roar suddenly resounded from the depths of the starry sky. The next moment, a terrifying pressure swept down from the depths of the starry sky. Another minor sage. The powerful pressure's target was Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly raised his head, and a ferocious look flashed in his eyes. He leaped up and slashed with his sword with both hands. Boom. The pressure was directly shattered by him. The white-robed old man Zhang Heng narrowed his eyes when he saw this. At this moment he was slightly shocked. This guy isn't afraid of the pressure of a sage. He's a good seedling. At this moment the sky suddenly split open and a middle-aged man suddenly walked out. Zhang Heng frowned when he saw this middle-aged man, Yan Li. Yan Li, the vice hall master of the enforcement hall. Gu Qing's face sank again when he saw Yan Li. Yan Li looked at Yi Xian. First you killed an inner disciple, then an inner elder, then an enforcement hall elder. I have to say this is the first time in the great spiritual palace. You've got guts. Yi Xian said indifferently, I'll kill anyone who dares to humiliate me and my outer disciple. Yan Li stared at Yi Xian. There are many disciples who humiliated you. Not only are there many inner disciples, but there are also some true disciples. Why, are you going to kill them all? Yi Xian looked Yan Li in the eye. Kill. If an inner disciple humiliates my outer disciple, I'll kill him. If a true disciple humiliates my outer disciple, I'll kill him. At Yi Xian's words, a lady in a purple dress suddenly laughed. This guy is extraordinarily smart. His words have elevated the grudge between the two of them to the inner and outer sect. He has always admitted that he is a disciple of the great spiritual god palace. In this case, it is an internal matter. With his talent and battle prowess, the higher-ups will definitely cherish him. He should not die. There was a man next to the lady in purple dress. The man glanced at Yi Xian without saying a word. The lady in purple dress looked at the man next to her. Brother Yaoye, can you see through him? Li Yaoye. This man was the most monstrous genius in the history of the great spiritual palace. Li Yaoye shook his head. I can't. Then he looked at the lady. Miss Lin Lang, can you see through him? Xiao Lin Lang shook her head and smiled. I can't. This guy is interesting. Do you think the enforcement hall will take him away? Li Yaoye looked at Yan Li. I'm afraid Elder Yan can't take him away. Xiao Lin Lang smirked. Why? Li Yaoye said plainly. Intuition. Xiao Lin Lang was stunned, then laughed. What a good intuition. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said with a smile. After all these years, an interesting guy has finally appeared. In the distance, Yan Li stared at Yi Xian. What if I humiliate your outer sect? Are you going to kill me too? Yi Xian pointed his sword at Yan Li and laughed. Kill? Why not? Not just you, I will kill anyone who humiliates the outer sect in the great spiritual palace. Even if he's above the sage level, I will still kill him. Yan Li looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. On the other side, Xiao Lin Lang suddenly shook her head and smiled. This guy is really interesting. He directly escalated the feud between the inner and outer sect to the great spiritual palace. Now it seems like he killed to protect the great spiritual palace. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly pointed his sword at Yan Li. Are you going to humiliate the great spiritual palace? How dare you insult my great spiritual god palace? I, Yi Xian, swear that I will not rest until you die. Everyone, Yan Li was a little confused. When did I humiliate the great spiritual palace? Chapter 1778. Everyone here had slightly strange expressions on their faces. Yi Xian is really good at talking nonsense. He's actually become someone who defends the great spirit palace. Yan Li gazed at Yi Xian. Wang Xiu and the others didn't humiliate the great spirit palace. Yi Xian laughed furiously. They didn't humiliate the great spirit palace? Then let me ask you, does the outer court belong to the great spirit palace? Yan Li fell silent when he heard this. The outer court does belong to the great spirit palace. No one can deny that. Yi Xian continued. Since the outer court belongs to the great spirit palace, then isn't he humiliating the great spirit palace the same as humiliating the great spirit palace? He humiliated the great spirit palace, so I killed him to protect the dignity of the great spirit palace. What's wrong with that? What wrong did I, Yi Xian, do? Everyone was speechless. The Grand Elder of the inner court shook his head repeatedly. Damn it. This fellow is really good at talking nonsense. It might seem like twisted logic, but it's useful. If Yi Xian didn't have the strength, then not to mention twisted logic, even the right logic would be useless. If he violated the rules of the sect, then he would have to die. But Yi Xian did have the strength. Yan Li suddenly said, You think you're a member of the Great Spirit Palace, right? Yi Xian replied, Of course. He naturally wouldn't be stupid enough to say that he wanted to leave the Great Spirit Palace. If he did that, then he had no doubt that the entire Great Spirit Palace wouldn't let him off. Yan Li nodded slightly. Since you admit that you're a member of the Great Spirit Palace, then will you obey the rules of the Great Spirit Palace? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, That depends. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone here was quite stunned. Especially the inner court disciples. That depends? That's too fucking arrogant. Heng couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. Yan Li laughed from extreme rage as well. You say that depends? Do you think you're the palace lord? Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. Elder, I can see that you are a reasonable person. Let me ask you, if someone insulted the law enforcement hall, what would you do? Yan Li looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian continued. I am an outer court disciple. I have the responsibility to protect the outer court's dignity. Of course, I am also a member of the Great Spiritual Palace. If anyone insults the Great Spiritual Palace, I will also kill them with my sword. Right at this moment, Gu Qing spoke abruptly. Well said. As he spoke, he bowed slightly to Yan Li. Elder Yan, I am willing to be punished together with Yi Xian. Yan Li looked at Gu Qing. He committed a crime punishable by death. The death penalty. Gu Qing's expression instantly turned slightly ugly when he heard this. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Elder Gu Qing, I Yi Xian, am willing to bear the consequences myself. Yanli suddenly said, Yi Xian, do you think that because you have strength, talent and a future, the sect will definitely not punish you? As he spoke, he shook his head. You're wrong. He was gravely mistaken. Without rules, nothing can be accomplished. There must be rules in the sect. If there are no rules, how can the great spiritual palace restrain the thousands of disciples? First, you killed an inner court disciple, then an inner court elder, and even the law enforcement elder. This kind of behavior is truly vile. No matter how monstrous you are, no matter how talented you are, the great spiritual palace will not tolerate you. Because in your eyes there is no law enforcement hall, no sect rules. As soon as he finished speaking, an invisible pressure directly enveloped Yi Xian. Yanli looked at Yi Xian. I know you're good at talking and ting, but no matter how you argue, it's a fact that you killed them. Someone had to pay for the deaths of the three of them. I won't kill you on the spot, but you have to go back with me to be judged. Not only you. As he spoke, he glanced at Gu Qing. As an outer court elder, he has a responsibility as well. Both of you have to go back to the law enforcement hall to be judged. Gu Qing smiled bitterly. I'm willing to be judged. However, Yi Xian shook his head. I won't accept it. Hearing this, everyone was speechless. Zhang Heng shook his head slightly. In fact, he cherished talent and had thought of recruiting Yi Xian into the inner court. However, what Yi Xian had done this time was too serious, and it even involved the law enforcement hall. It would be difficult for him to protect himself. Even if he did, he would have to pay a huge price. This was a price he didn't want to pay. Yanli looked at Yi Xian. It's fine if you don't accept it. Then continue killing. Kill me first, then destroy the law enforcement hall, and finally rebel against the palace master. Yi Xian opened his palm and a sword appeared in it. He looked straight at Yanli. I won't give up. If you want to bring me back to be judged, then you can only bring my corpse back. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the surroundings gasped. This fellow still wants to challenge a minor saint? A Heaven Ascension realm expert challenging a minor saint? Is he crazy? On the other side, Xiao Linlang chuckled. Brother Yao Yi, this matter doesn't seem to end so easily. Li Yaoye looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Xiao Linlang grinned. This fellow really has balls. In the distance, Yanli nodded slightly in front of Yi Xian. Alright. Come, let me see how monstrous you are. As he spoke, he suddenly took a step forward. Bang. In an instant, a thunderous aura swept towards Yi Xian like a wave. In the distance, Yi Xian stabbed with his sword. Bang. The thunderous aura was directly slashed into pieces. Yanli suddenly leaped forward and smashed his fist down. Bang. In an instant, the entire starry sky became illusory. Some of the inner court disciples weren't able to endure the aftershock of this punch at all, and they retreated explosively. Even Elder Gu Qing was forced to retreat repeatedly. A saint's punch. Even though he was only a minor saint, this punch was still capable of destroying the world. In front of Yanli, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Fist energy. At this moment he finally felt threatened. The danger of death. A true expert. That was exactly what he wanted. Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes, and then he swiftly drew his sword and slashed. Draw the sword to decide life and death. At the instant his sword descended, the sword in his hand shattered because it wasn't able to endure the force of that strike. However, the sword still fell. It was a head-on collision. Rumble. An expanse of sword energy suddenly shattered in front of Yi Xian, and in the next moment his figure retreated explosively for over 10 kilometers. On the other hand, Yanli had returned to where he stood earlier. The starry sky trembled while countless rays of sword energy shot into the surroundings. It was a complete mess. Yanli gazed at Yi Xian with a trace of seriousness in his eyes. This fellow had really blocked his punch. Actually, he hadn't used his full strength in that punch, only 70% of it. Not to mention Yi Xian, even a top inner court disciple wouldn't be able to block this 70% of his strength. Only an elite disciple might be able to block this punch of his. In other words, Yi Xian already had the qualifications to become an elite disciple. Most importantly, Yi Xian was only at the Heaven Ascension realm. The Heaven Ascension realm. Yanli gazed at Yi Xian from afar and he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Monster. As he thought about it, he couldn't help but glance at Gu Qing with a hostile expression. Since Yi Xian had entered the great spiritual god palace, he should have been properly guided and guided. But now Yi Xian had committed such a grave mistake, and this made it difficult for both sides to step down. Make an exception for Yi Xian? Then where were the rules of the sect? Would others imitate him in the future? This situation was too terrible. Even if he cherished talent and even wanted Yi Xian to join the enforcement hall and become a sword of the enforcement hall, because Yi Xian's character was very suitable for the enforcement hall. To join the enforcement hall, one needed a fearless person like him. But now it was no longer possible. Because what Yi Xian was challenging was the rules of the enforcement hall and the great spiritual god palace. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Again." As he spoke, he opened his palm and a sword appeared in his right hand. Yi Xian directly charged forward. A ray of sword light tore through the battlefield. Nearby, Yanli suddenly punched out. Rumble. The ray of sword light shattered in front of Yanli, and Yi Xian was instantly knocked back to his original position, while Yanli instantly retreated hundreds of feet. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings had become solemn when they witnessed this scene. Yi Xian could actually fight a minor saint head-on. Was this really just the Heaven Ascension realm? A trace of seriousness appeared in Yan Li's eyes as well. Yi Xian's strength had greatly exceeded his expectations. In the distance, Yi Xian glanced at his right hand and laughed bitterly. Besides the green profound sword, no other sword was able to endure the might of his drawing technique and determine life and death with a single strike. In other words, he was utterly unable to bring forth his limits without utilizing the green profound sword. If he utilized the green profound sword, then he was confident in his ability to instantly annihilate Yan Li. But he didn't want to use the green profound sword. He had to find a spare one. Right at this moment, Yan Li suddenly said, "Come, let me see exactly how monstrous you are." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward and smashed his fist forward, and the starry sky in the surroundings started to be obliterated. A martial technique. This wasn't a casual punch, it was a martial technique. Moreover, it was a formidable martial technique. In the distance, the dark space around Yi Xian actually started to burn. Because the strength of Yan Li's punch was truly too formidable. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and his left hand held tightly onto the sheath of his sword. At this moment, he truly smelled the scent of death. Yi Xian still didn't utilize the green profound sword. He suddenly took a step forward, drew his sword and slashed once more. Draw the sword to determine life and death. Tingle slash. Rumble. Under everyone's gazes, Yi Xian retreated explosively for 30 kilometers while Yan Li retreated for a few kilometers as well. As soon as he stopped, his right hand split open and fresh blood flowed out. In the distance, as soon as Yi Xian stopped, the sword in his right hand split open and transformed into nothingness. The sword shattered. There were two reasons for this. Firstly, Yan Li's strength was too great. Secondly, his own strength was too great. The sword couldn't withstand his own strength at all. Yi Xian shook his head slightly. Because of the sword, he felt like he was being restrained. Because he couldn't bring forth his full strength. In the distance, Yan Li suddenly said, "You've slightly shocked me." Yi Xian looked at Yan Li and Yan Li chuckled and said, "You're indeed monstrous. What a pity." As he spoke, he was about to attack. However, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Allow me to borrow a sword first." As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and opened his palm. Sword. His voice was like thunder, shaking the entire ancient God Star region. In the next moment, the entire ancient God Star field was filled with the sound of countless swords humming in response. Then streaks of sword light pierced through the starry sky and shot towards Yi Xian. Chapter 1779. Somewhere in the mountain range, a woman who sat cross-legged on a tree suddenly frowned. She looked at the sword in front of her and it was trembling slightly. The woman said softly, "Someone is summoning the sword." As she spoke, she looked towards the horizon. Who is summoning the sword? The sword in front of the woman was still trembling. A moment later, the woman said softly, "I'm afraid it's not the Sword Alliance." As she spoke, she fell silent for a moment before she suddenly waved her right hand. "Go." The sword transformed into a ray of green light and vanished into the horizon. Countless rays of sword light streaked through the starry sky like shooting stars. In the end, all the rays of sword light converged above Yi Xian's head. Over 100,000 swords. This scene shocked everyone present. A swordsman. A top-notch swordsman. Yan Li's expression grew more and more solemn as he stood before Yi Xian. On the other side, Xiao Linlong's expression became solemn as well. Underestimated. She'd greatly underestimated this swordsman. On the other hand, Li Yaoya's expression remained calm. In the distance, Yi Xian raised his head and glanced around. In the end, a sword suddenly fell before him. The sword was 1.3 m long and a finger wide. It was completely green and there was a tiny red dot at the tip that seemed like fresh blood. Yi Xian frowned slightly. This was a sword with an owner. Moreover, its owner was probably very strong. Why did he agree to lend me the sword? Yi Xian didn't think too much about it and immediately grabbed the sword because it was the best amongst the 100,000 swords. As for whether it could withstand his life and death strike, he would have to try it to find out. After he held the sword in his hand, Yi Xian glanced at the swords above him. Disperse. As soon as he finished speaking, the countless swords transformed into rays of sword light and vanished into the horizon. Yi Xian looked at Yan Li, again. One more time. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward with the sword in his hand. A ray of light flashed through the battlefield. In the distance, Yan Li's eyes narrowed slightly, and he took a step forward as well before blasting his fist forward. Rumble. An explosion suddenly resounded like a thunderclap in the deathly silent starry sky. As the sword light shattered, Yi Xian and Yan Li retreated at the same time. Both sides retreated tens of thousands of feet. As soon as Yan Li stopped, his right arm split open and disappeared bit by bit. In the distance, blood seeped out from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. The eyes of everyone in the surroundings were extremely solemn when they witnessed this scene. Yi Xian broke one of the little saint's arms. What kind of power was this? Was he really only at the Heaven Ascension realm? Everyone had their doubts, because it was impossible for a Heaven Ascension expert to achieve this. The difference in their realms was just too great. At this time, Yan Li looked at Yi Xian. I still underestimated you. Yi Xian smiled. Elder Yan, do you still want to come? If you come, we'll fight to the death this time. Life and death. Everyone fell silent. Was Yi Xian being arrogant when he said that? Obviously not. This guy could really kill a small saint now. And he dared to kill one. Yan Li looked at Yi Xian. Even if I can't do anything to you, someone in the enforcement hall can. And you want to fight the entire enforcement hall in Great Spiritual Palace? Yi Xian shook his head. That's not what I meant. I just don't want to be bullied. Yan Li said in a low voice. Why didn't you report Wang Xiu to the sect? Yi Xian smiled. Is it useful? Yan Li fell silent. Yi Xian smiled. Elder Yan, you can leave. Yan Li nodded, turned around and left. He couldn't take Yi Xian away. In the entire enforcement hall, only the two great saints could take Yi Xian away. But now one of them was in closed-door cultivation, and the other wasn't in Great Spiritual Palace. If they wanted to continue capturing Yi Xian, the palace lord would have to personally give the order. In fact, the enforcement hall was in an awkward position. They were supposed to maintain order in Great Spiritual Palace, but now no one could control Yi Xian. After Yan Li left, Zhang Heng took a look at Yi Xian, then turned around and left. If Yan Li couldn't do anything to this guy, then he couldn't. He had to hurry back to the inner sect to inform all the inner sect disciples not to provoke this guy. This guy was a freak. Yi Xian turned to Gu Qing, smiled. Elder Gu Qing, it's fine now. Gu Qing smiled bitterly. This? Yi Xian smiled. I killed him, so I'll settle it myself. Gu Qing hesitated, then nodded. All right. Yi Xian turned to Li Xiran and Dao Yi. Are you guys still going to participate in Glittering Jewels Pavilion's gathering? Dao Yi smiled. I don't care if I participate or not. Li Xiran hesitated, then said, let's go back. He realized that it was a little awkward for him to participate in Glittering Jewels Pavilion's gathering, because the invitation wasn't for them. Yi Xian nodded. Then let's return to Great Spiritual Palace. Just as the three of them were about to leave, a voice suddenly sounded from the side. Young Master Yi, please wait. Yi Xian turned around. Not far away, a woman was walking towards him slowly. It's Miss Lin Lang. Li Xiran, who was beside Yi Xian, suddenly exclaimed. Xiao Lin Lang. Xiao Linlang walked to Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, since you're already at Glittering Jewels Pavilion, why don't you participate in this gathering before leaving? Yi Xian smiled. Thank you for your kindness, Miss Linlang, but let's forget about the gathering. Xiao Linlang suddenly said, I just found out that young Master Yi is interested in that sword skill, sword extinction. Is that right? Yi Xian nodded. A little. Xiao Linlang smiled. I have something better here. Young Master Yi, are you interested in having an exchange? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then kept the green sword in his hand and said, Sure. Xiao Linlang smiled. Young Master Yi, Miss Dao Yi and Young Master Li, please. A moment later, everyone left. In the mountain range, the woman who was sitting cross-legged on the tree suddenly frowned. Don't you return the sword after using it? What kind of person is this? After saying that, she disappeared directly. Xiao Linlang brought Yi Xian and the others to the inner hall. She looked around and smiled. The things here are actually not that good. I'll bring the three of you to see something better. After saying that, she walked to a wall and lightly knocked on it. The wall disappeared and there was a small hall inside. The three of them entered the small hall. Inside the small hall there were 6 crystal pillars. Xiao Linlang walked to the crystal pillar in the middle and opened her palm. On the pillar, a black scroll floated into her hand. Xiao Linlang took the scroll and walked to Yi Xian, then said, This is an incomplete sword skill left behind by an ancient god-rank swordsman. Yi Xian looked at the scroll. Incomplete sword skill? Xiao Linlang nodded. Yes. It's a bit incomplete. However, it was left behind by an ancient god realm master. It's priceless. Yi Xian asked solemnly, Above the sages are the ancient gods? Xiao Linlang smiled. Yes. Yi Xian glanced at the scroll, then smiled. What does Miss Linlang want? Xiao Linlang looked at Yi Xian. The sword drawing technique that young Master Yi displayed. Sword drawing technique. Yi Xian laughed heartily. Miss Linlang, you have good taste. Xiao Linlang smiled. Young Master Yi, are you willing? Yi Xian looked at the scroll, then shook his head with a smile. Miss Linlang, you've seen the power of my sword skill, but I know nothing about your sword skill's power. Moreover, it's incomplete. In other words, whether it can be cultivated or not is a problem. What do you think? Xiao Linlang looked at Yi Xian. It was left behind by an ancient god. Yi Xian blinked. Then do you know who left that sword skill of mine? Xiao Linlang smiled. Could it be an ancient god? Yi Xian laughed heartily. Ancient god? He had a feeling that the legendary ancient god was not as awesome as his dad. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Linlang, I'm not exchanging this sword skill. Because I feel that, not to mention it's incomplete, even if it's complete, it's not worth exchanging. Xiao Linlang looked at Yi Xian. Looks like I've underestimated young Master Ye's background. Saying that, she put away the scroll, then said, Young Master Yi, let's go to the main hall. Everyone should be here. Everyone can drink tea and discuss the Tao. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, Miss Linlang, you said that the sword skill is incomplete, right? Xiao Linlang nodded. Yes. Yi Xian said with a smile, Maybe I can complete it. Xiao Linlang looked at Yi Xian. What do you mean, young Master Yi? Yi Xian said with a smile, Give it to me to study. Maybe I can complete it. If it's complete TSK, then its value will increase by more than 10 times. And if it's not complete, Miss Linlang won't lose anything. What do you think? Xiao Linlang shook her head and smiled. Young Master Yi, you're trying to get something without risking anything. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Linlang, in this world, there's no swordsman who's more powerful than me. If I can't complete it, then no one in this world will be able to do so. At this moment, Xiao Ta suddenly said, Young Master, you said you're the most powerful swordsman than Master and Sister Tianming. Yi Xian suddenly said in his heart, Shut up. Xiao Ta. In front of Yi Xian, Xiao Linlang smiled. Young Master Yi, you said there's no swordsman who's more powerful than you. Are you serious when you say this? Yi Xian said seriously, Have you seen a swordsman who's more powerful than me? Xiao Linlang hesitated, then said, Young Master Yi, I might have seen one before. Yi Xian. Xiao Linlang smiled. The other party is really powerful. Yi Xian laughed. Miss Xiao, you still don't understand me. If I use my full strength, can there be a swordsman in this world who can take a strike from me? Xiao Linlang looked at Yi Xian. I've seen a swordsman, he's very powerful. Yi Xian smiled. What's his name? Let him come out and fight with me. If I use my second strike, it's my loss. Xiao Linlang shook her head. I don't know what his name is, I only know that he's wearing a green robe and he has a little girl and a little white guy with him. Yi Xian's expression froze. Xiao Linlang looked at Yi Xian. Looking at young Master Ye's expression, you seem to know him? Young Master Yi, can he take a strike from you? Yi Xian's expression was a little unnatural. This. Chapter 1780. Yi Xian was speechless. This woman had seen his dad before. Could it be that his dad had some power in ancient god galaxy? No. Didn't they say that there were other forces stronger than Temple and Sword Alliance? Ancient god galaxy only had two super forces. One was Great Spiritual Palace and the other was Battle Pavilion. Could it be Battle Pavilion? Xiao Linlang suddenly smiled. Young Master Yi, do you know the swordsman I mentioned? Yi Xian collected his thoughts and smiled. I do. And I'm quite familiar with him. Xiao Linlang looked at Yi Xian. No wonder young Master Ye's swordsmanship is so strong. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Linlang, let's get back to business. Do you want to let me take a look at this incomplete sword skill? If I can recover, won't you be in luck? Xiao Linlang smiled. All right. With that, she directly handed the black scroll in her hand to Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not stand on ceremony and kept the scroll. He opened it and a black light entered between his eyebrows. Instantly, countless information surged into his mind. Nameless sword skill. No name. Gradually Yi Xian frowned. This was because he realized that this incomplete sword skill did not have a front or a back. There was only a middle part. It was like it was divided into 3 parts. It was really incomplete. Xiao Linlang smiled. Young Master Yi, what do you think? Yi Xian shook his head. I have to study it. Xiao Linlang nodded. All right. Amo suddenly walked in. She walked to Xiao Linlang's side and said softly, everyone is here. Xiao Linlang smiled. Let's begin. Then she looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, let's go out. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Everyone left the small hall and came to the main hall. There were already more than 60 people gathered in the hall. Yi Xian glanced at them. Besides him and Dao Yi, the rest were at least mortal severing realm. Moreover, these people's auras were extremely profound. One look and you could tell that they were the kind that didn't contain any fake auras. Not only that, some of them were at spacetime realm and 2 of them were unfathomable. A man and a woman. Not far from the platform sat 2 people, a man and a woman. Both of them were from the great spiritual god palace. At this moment Li Xiran, who was beside Yi Xian, said in a deep voice, they are the true disciples. The man should be Qin Gu from Guanlan Peak and the woman should be Mu Ling from Sanqing Peak. Cultivators. Yi Xian looked at the 2 again. He had to admit that the 2 of them were not easy to deal with. At this time the surrounding inner disciples walked up to the 2 and bowed to them. Li Xiaoran hesitated for a moment and then said, Brother Yi, according to the rules, outer court disciples and inner court disciples have to bow to elite disciples. Yi Xian said with a smile, forget it. Li Xiran thought for a moment and nodded. Since so many people bowed, they probably wouldn't notice if they didn't go. Some of the inner disciples' gazes fell on Yi Xian from time to time. Obviously, the news of what happened earlier had spread. Xiao Linlang suddenly appeared on the round table. She looked around and smiled. I'm glad everyone came to Glittering Jewels Pavilion. Next we'll be having tea and discussing cultivation. Let's have some tea first. As she spoke, she clapped her hands and a group of maidservants walked in. The maidservants poured a cup of spirit tea for everyone present. When Yi Xian picked up the cup, he was stunned. Such pure spiritual energy. He glanced at the spiritual tea in the teacup. The tea was crystal-like and very beautiful. Li Xiran, who was next to Yi Xian, said excitedly, this is Saint Grade spiritual tea. Saint Grade. Yi Xian was curious. Is it good? Li Xiran nodded. Of course it's good. This cup is better than years of cultivation for us. In the great spiritual god palace, only the top inner disciples can have such Saint Grade spiritual tea. He drank it in one gulp. Li Xiran trembled as the spiritual tea entered his body. He revealed an intoxicated expression. Yi Xian frowned. Is it really that good? He drank it in one gulp as well. The moment the spiritual tea entered his body, a warm feeling spread from his heart. Feels good. That was Yi Xian's first thought. Soon he noticed that his body had undergone some wonderful changes. His cultivation had increased. It could really increase his cultivation. Yi Xian looked at the teacup in front of him and sighed in his heart. Needless to say, cultivation really needed money. The more monstrous a person was, the more money he needed. The reason why he didn't have much of a concept of money was because he had never lacked money. Just like now. Cultivation resources? He had a divine grade eternal life spring. Cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques? He had the most awesome sword drawing technique and one sword to decide life and death. Connections? His sister was invincible. His father was invincible. His big brother was invincible. If he wanted resources, he had resources. If he wanted connections, he had connections. Yi Xian suddenly felt a little ashamed. He seemed to be a second-generation heir. At this moment, Xiao Linlang suddenly smiled and said, "Everyone, the tea has been drunk. Who wants to come up first?" Not a single person in the surroundings moved. Xiao Linlang was about to speak again when a man suddenly stood up. He turned to look at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "Young Master Yi can fight a minor saint at the Heaven Ascension realm. Why don't you let young Master Yi explain it to us?" Xiao Linlang's eyes narrowed when she heard this, and a cold light flashed in the depths of her eyes. They were going to cause trouble in her territory. Li Shiran said in a low voice next to Yi Xian, "Brother Yi, this person is Ku Ran, second on the Earth rankings." Second on the Earth rankings. All the inner court disciples looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian gazed at Ku Ran and smiled. "Brother Ku, as far as I'm concerned, the matter between me and the inner court has probably come to an end." Ku Ran roared with laughter. "You killed someone and said it's over. Don't you think that's laughable?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "This is Miss Linlong's territory. It's really inexcusable for us to cause trouble here." Ku Ran turned around and bowed slightly to Xiao Linlang. "Miss Linlang, I have no intention of targeting you. I'm just slightly unhappy and I have no choice but to speak up." Xiao Linlang smiled. "Since young Master Ku is unhappy, then speak up." Ku Ran bowed slightly. "Thank you for your understanding." As he spoke, he turned around to look at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, you killed an inner court disciple. Do you think it's over?" "No. Even though the enforcement hall can't punish you, my inner court won't let the matter rest. So long as you're alive, my inner court will never let the matter rest." Yi Xian picked up the teacup in front of him and took a small sip, and then he said, "Do all of you want to gang up on me or fight me one-on-one? If it's a one-on-one battle, then I can fight all of you. If it's a group fight, then all of you can come at me together." Whoosh! An uproar resounded in the surroundings. How arrogant! He challenged a group on his own. The expressions of the inner court disciples here had become unsightly. Right at this moment, Qin Gu, who sat at the front, suddenly stood up and he gazed at Yi Xian. "Are all outer court disciples so arrogant now?" Yi Xian smiled. "So you asked an elite disciple to help you?" Qin Gu walked slowly over to stand not too far away from Yi Xian, and then he stared at Yi Xian and said, "I heard that you said that inner court disciples looked down on the outer court, so you killed inner court disciples. Elite disciples looked down on the outer court, so you killed elite disciples. Right?" Yi Xian nodded. "That's what I said." Qin Gu grinned. "I look down on your outer court. Come kill me." As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. Even the sound of a falling needle could be heard. Qin Gu took another 2 steps forward and then he gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. "I look down on your outer court. Please kill me." Yi Xian put down his teacup and smiled. "All right." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly drew his sword. He drew his sword to decide life and death. At the instant that he drew his sword, the expressions of everyone here changed drastically. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through Qinji's eyes, and then he suddenly smashed his fist forward. Sky obliteration. A peak divine rank martial technique. That wasn't the main point. The main point was that Qin Gu was actually at the minor saint realm. He wasn't at the space-time realm at all. At this moment, everyone here finally understood why Qin Gu dared to provoke Yi Xian like this. After all, Yi Xian had been able to go head-on against a minor saint just now. So he'd attained the minor saint realm. As expected, none of the elite disciples were simple. At the instant that Yi Xian's sword descended, bang! The entire glittering jade pavilion was instantly transformed into ashes. Yi Xian and Qin Gu retreated explosively. However, at the instant that they were blasted flying, Yi Xian drew his sword and slashed. This time it wasn't the sword drawing technique, but the sword draw to decide life and death. Qin Ji's pupils constricted abruptly when he drew his sword, and then he swiftly raised his arms to block. World Guard. Bang. In an instant, a barrier of the river of time appeared in front of him. This was no ordinary river of time. This river of time was like a golden bell that enveloped him. Not only that, but there were strange golden runes flashing above the river of time. The energy of a saint. It was the energy of a saint. It was a formidable energy that only a saint could possess. But at this moment, Qin wasn't using it to attack, he was using it to defend. Under the gazes of everyone, Yi Xian's sword descended. Bang! With a slash of the sword, the barrier of the river of time trembled violently and then shattered. Qin instantly retreated 10,000 feet away, and as soon as he stopped, his body exploded. He'd shattered his body with a single strike. Xiao Linlong's expression instantly turned solemn when she witnessed this scene. At this moment she'd noticed that Yi Xian possessed two types of sword drawing technique. The first was a simple sword drawing technique. The second was that the sword drawing technique also contained an extremely terrifying sword skill. Two sword techniques. The might of the second technique was much more terrifying than the first. Even a saint couldn't resist it. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed at the instant they saw Qin Ji's body explode. Qin who'd attained the minor saint realm, was actually unable to resist a single strike from Yi Xian. Yi Xian walked slowly towards Qin while the green sword in his hand trembled violently. Actually, it was mainly because of this sword. Otherwise, the might of his sword technique wouldn't be so terrifying. It wasn't that he wasn't capable, it was because the requirements of his sword technique were truly too great. Ordinary swords weren't able to bring forth his full strength. Moreover, even this green sword wasn't able to bring forth his full strength. While he was with Qin, he didn't just eat and sleep every single day. Not to mention him, anyone who stayed with Qin for a period of time would probably become extremely terrifying. Especially when the sword technique he utilized was a combination of Qin and his father's techniques. An ordinary person wouldn't be able to resist it at all. Suddenly Yi Xian vanished on the spot. A moment later, a sword was pressed against the center of Qin Ji's forehead. At practically the exact same moment, a voice suddenly resounded from the depths of the starry sky. "Try and touch him." A savage smile arose on the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. "I'll try." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly pressed his sword forward. Qin Ji's soul was instantly obliterated. Moreover, even his consciousness was obliterated. P.S. Why don't you try voting? Chapter 1781. He killed an elite disciple. Everyone in the surroundings fell silent when they witnessed this scene. He even dared to kill an elite disciple. Is there anything that this fellow doesn't dare to kill? Xiao Linlang shook his head slightly. This is bad. Qin is an elite disciple. Whose disciple is he? It's Cao Xiu's disciple. The Great Spirit Palace had 6 peaks, and the peak masters weren't ordinary figures. They were the pillars of the palace. Cao Xiu would absolutely not let the matter rest since Yi Xian had publicly killed Qin. Xiao Linlang looked up. Space suddenly split open in the starry sky, and then a woman walked out slowly. She wore a Taoist robe, had long hair that hung loosely on her shoulders, and held a jade fan in her hand. The peak master of Sigei's peak, Cao Xiu. Cao Xiu's expression instantly became ferocious when she saw Qin being eliminated. She turned to look at Yi Xian and spoke fiercely. "Who gave you the gall to do that?" Yi Xian pointed his sword at Cao Xiu and roared with laughter. "Didn't you ask me to give it a try? I'll give it a try now. Bite me." Die. Cao Xiu suddenly waved her fan, and a ray of white light swept down and slashed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian drew his sword and slashed down. Rumble. Yi Xian's sword light was instantly shattered, and he retreated explosively for over 10 kilometers. A great saint. This isn't a minor saint. It's a true great saint. Yi Xian had just stopped when a wisp of blood seeped out of his mouth. Cao Xiu stared fixedly at Yi Xian and she seemed to have gone slightly mad. "No one can save you." Yi Xian roared with laughter. "You?" As soon as he finished speaking, he shot into the sky. The howl of a sword shook the sky. A wisp of disdain flashed through Chao Xiu's eyes. You think you're worthy of fighting me? As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed her fan forward. The energy of a saint. The energy of a true saint. She was a true great saint. Her fan struck the tip of Yi Xian's sword. Bang! A wave of sword light suddenly exploded in the sky. The sword in Yi Xian's hand trembled violently, and then he retreated explosively for 3 kilometers along with his sword. However, Chao Xiu did not move at all. Many inner court disciples heaved sighs of relief when they witnessed this scene. Fortunately, this fellow could not kill a great sage. Otherwise, it would be too heaven-defying. Great sage. Even in the ancient Godstar area, he would be considered as a super expert. Furthermore, how could Chao Xiu be an ordinary person since she was able to become the peak master of the 6 great peaks? In the past, she was also a proud daughter of the heavens, a super evildoer who reigned supreme in her generation. In the sky, Chao Xiu looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, she was somewhat shocked. This Yi Xian took 2 of her moves and didn't die. This was beyond her expectations. Down below, Yi Xian became a little excited. This was the kind of battle he wanted. At this time, Chao Xiu suddenly took a step forward. Boom! A powerful force directly swept towards Yi Xian. The force of a saint. Some inner court disciples weren't able to endure this force at all, and they retreated explosively. That was the force of a saint. Yi Xian gazed at Chao Xiu, and then he walked slowly towards her while powerful sword force swept out from within him. Bang! This sword force directly obstructed the force of a saint. Sword force? Chao Xiu's brows knit together slightly, and then her eyes narrowed slightly. Slaughter force. Yi Xian wasn't utilizing sword force at all, it was slaughter force. His slaughter force was actually so formidable. Chao Xiu was rather shocked. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly dashed forward. Bang! His slaughter force directly destroyed Chao Xiu's saint force. In the next moment, Yi Xian appeared above Chao Xiu and then he swiftly drew his sword and slashed. He drew his sword to decide life and death. 400 overlapped attacks. This was the limit he could reach at the moment. However, he still hadn't utilized his bloodline energy. His bloodline energy and the green profound sword were his final trump cards, and he didn't want to use them rashly. At the instant that Yi Xian drew his sword, countless cracks actually appeared on the green sword in his hand. Even the green sword found it slightly difficult to endure the power that determined life and death when he drew his sword. Heaven and earth were destroyed with a single strike. Chao Xiu's pupils suddenly constricted when she sensed the powerful force within Yi Xian's sword. Is this a sword strike from a Heaven Ascension stage expert? There was no time to think. Chao Xiu suddenly put away her folding fan, and then she pointed forward with her right hand. Countless golden talismans condensed on her fingertips. The finger of a saint. Take it head-on. She could only take it head-on in the face of Yi Xian's sword strike. Bang! Under everyone's gazes, a wave of sword light suddenly erupted, and in the next moment, both of them retreated explosively at the same time. Yi Xian retreated nearly 30 kilometers before he stopped, and as soon as he stopped, his right arm split open and blood sprayed out. Not only that, but his body was splitting open bit by bit and it was extremely shocking. In the distance, Chao Xiu had retreated thousands of meters as well, and when she stopped, her body directly became illusory. Her body was about to shatter. The expressions of everyone present changed drastically at the sight of this scene. Chao Xiu actually didn't manage to block Yi Xian's sword strike. Under everyone's gazes, Chao Xiu's body became more and more illusory, and in the end her body vanished, leaving only her soul behind. Everyone present was petrified. The great saint's body was shattered by a single strike from Yi Xian. Xiao Linlang took another deep look at Yi Xian. She realized that she had underestimated Yi Xian from the beginning until the end. Is this guy really only at the Heaven Ascension stage? That's a saint. Chao Xiu raised her head to look at Yi Xian. What sword technique was that? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. Draw the sword to decide life and death. I created it myself. What do you think? He created it himself. Everyone was dumbstruck when they heard this. He created it himself? Chao Xiu gazed at Yi Xian. Are you insulting my intelligence? Yi Xian roared with laughter. Have you seen anyone use such a sword technique? Chao Xiu fell silent. Don't say it. She really hadn't. Not only had she never seen such a terrifying sword technique, She hadn't even heard of it. Xian walked towards Xianxia with his sword in hand. We haven't decided life and death yet. Come take another strike from me. As he spoke, he vanished on the spot. Xiaoxia's eyes narrowed slightly, and she was just about to attack when an old man suddenly appeared in front of her. Xian slashed down with his sword. He didn't care who it was. In any case, he was going to slash. As soon as Xian slashed down, the old man pressed his fingers together and flicked lightly. Bang! The sword energy shattered, and then Xian returned to where he stood just moments ago. After he stopped moving, Xian's entire body was trembling. Xian gazed at the old man. The old man wore a wide gray robe and had a small wine gourd hanging on his waist. His hair was very long and his face was slightly dark. He seemed quite unkempt. The expressions of some of the inner court disciples changed drastically when they saw him, and they bowed in unison. Greetings, young martial uncle. Xiao spoke softly, junior brother. Young martial uncle. He was a legendary figure in the Grand Spirit Palace. All 6 peak masters came from the same master, but there were actually more than 6 of them. There were 7 of them. The youngest amongst them was the slovenly old man. He could have created a peak on his own, but he hadn't. As for the reason, no one knew. The young martial uncle gazed at Xian, withdrew his gourd and took a sip before he said, "You're very good. Very good." Xian glanced at the old man and said, "Old man, are you going to meddle in other people's business?" The young martial uncle shook his head. "She's my senior sister. Helping her isn't considered as meddling." Xian spoke solemnly. "How many senior brothers and junior sisters do all of you have?" The young martial uncle replied, 7. 7. Xian's eyelids twitched. "Damn it. There are 7. The young martial uncle gazed at Xian. "Do you want a one-on-one fight or a group fight? If it's a one-on-one fight, then you can fight all 7 of us. If it's a group fight, then we'll gang up on you." Xian was speechless. Everyone else was speechless. Xian said in a deep voice, "People only have one life and what they fight for is their dignity. You can't be so shameless." The young martial uncle took another sip of wine and said, "You're too ruthless. You don't give us any room to negotiate." As he spoke, he shook his head. "I don't really like your extreme character." Xian smiled and said, "I don't need you to like me." The young martial uncle nodded slightly. "You think you're so outstanding that the temple won't kill you, so you're fearless?" Xian shook his head and smiled. "I don't have such thoughts. I'm just thinking that when Qinggu comes looking for trouble with me, I don't believe his master doesn't know." As he spoke, he looked at Xiao. "Am I right?" Xiao looked at him and did not speak. Xian smiled and said, "You see, she knows. But she still asked him to come looking for trouble with me. To be honest, why should I indulge him? He came looking for trouble with me, why can't I kill him? Just because he's a true disciple? Just because he has a powerful master?" The young martial uncle was silent. He was also a little speechless. Even the old man from the law enforcement hall couldn't do anything to this guy. How could an ordinary true disciple do anything to him? Most importantly, this guy was obviously a hothead. Thinking of this, the young martial uncle couldn't help turning his head to look at Xiao, who didn't know that Xian was a spirit of the great spiritual god palace. Everyone was hiding and waiting for the law enforcement hall to deal with him. Why did he come out of Guanlon Peak? Xian suddenly said, "Old man, do you still want to fight?" The young martial uncle looked at Xian for a moment and turned his head. "Hall Master Yan, are you not going to come out to uphold the temple's rules?" "Hall Master Yan." Xian turned his head and saw an old man slowly walking out from not far away. The law enforcement hall master. Beside Yan Shi was Yan Li. Yan Shi looked at Xian. "I never thought that my great spiritual god palace would produce such a monster like you." Xian glanced at Yan Shi and secretly put up his guard. Inside his body, the Qingxian sword was ready to strike. Yan Shi looked at Xian. "You're a monster, a very, very monster. However, the temple's rules are the temple's rules. Not to mention you, even Li Yaoye can't violate the temple's rules. Therefore you must die. Must die." This was the final decision. Beside Yan Shi, Yan Li's eyes flashed with a trace of complexity. In fact, they had discussed this matter before. What Xian did was too vile. If they let Xian go today, then the law enforcement hall's dignity and authority would be gone. Moreover, Xian had already incurred the wrath of the public. He must be killed. Xianxia looked at Yi Xian. Outer disciple Yi Xian has violated the temple's rules. Execute him on the spot. As his voice fell, boom. In an instant, an invisible barrier directly locked the space around Yi Xian. Chapter 1782. Kill Yi Xian. A trace of surprise flashed through Shaolin Long's eyes. The great spiritual god palace's decision had exceeded her expectations. In her opinion, since Yi Xian was so monstrous, the great spiritual god palace would definitely think of a way to protect Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xian was able to fight a saint at the Heaven Ascension realm. His monstrous talent might not be inferior to Li Yaoye. However, she hadn't expected that the great spiritual god palace would choose to kill Yi Xian in the end. Shaolin Lang sighed softly and glanced at Yi Xian. This fellow is really too ruthless. Yi Xian would kill at the slightest disagreement, and it was the kind that would directly erase one's existence. He didn't give any room for negotiation. In the distance, a mysterious aura suddenly appeared around Yi Xian. The weakest was at the minor saint realm. Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "I request to go to the ancestors' platform." The ancestors' platform. Cao Xiu's expression instantly changed drastically. "You're not allowed." Yi Xian blinked. "According to what I know, the ancestor once said that no one from the great spiritual god palace is allowed to stop anyone who wants to go to the life and death arena. Am I right?" Cao Xiu stared fixedly at Yi Xian without saying a word. Because Yi Xian was right. In order to not let any genius go, the great spiritual god palace had set a rule that no one was allowed to stop anyone who wanted to go to the ancestors' platform. The expressions of Yan Shi and the others were slightly unsightly. They hadn't expected that Yi Xian would request to go to the ancestors' platform. Could they let this fellow go? If they let Yi Xian go, then with Yi Xian's terrifying talent and strength, it was very likely that he would obtain the ancestors' acknowledgement. At that time, could they kill Yi Xian? If they didn't let Yi Xian go, then it would be equivalent to going against the ancestors' rule. This was no joke. Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'm going to the ancestors' platform." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the distance. "Wait." Right at this moment, the nearby young martial uncle spoke abruptly. Yi Xian stopped and looked at little Uncle Master. Little Uncle Master stared back at Yi Xian. "If you want to go up to the ancestors' platform, that's fine. We won't stop you. However, I want to challenge you first. Life or death challenge." A challenge to the death. All the spectators were stunned. A great saint challenging a heaven ascension expert? Was he serious? At the side, Shaolin Long's brows also slightly furrowed. This was a little too much. This little martial uncle was a great saint, while Yi Xian was only at the heaven ascension realm. It was shameful for the strong to challenge the weak. Yi Xian suddenly laughed and said, "Old man, are you serious?" Little martial uncle nodded. "I'm serious." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "I refuse." Rejected. Everyone in the surroundings looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Why should I fight you?" Little Uncle Master stared at Yi Xian and said, "Are you afraid?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Don't try to provoke me like that. I'm just playing around. Old man, I won't fight you. Do you know why? Because I want to piss you off. You want to kill me, but I won't give you a chance. Are you angry?" Everyone was speechless. Little Uncle Master stared fixedly at Yi Xian and was about to attack. Meanwhile, Yi Xian turned to look at the hall master of the enforcement hall, Yan Shi, and said, "Does it conform to the palace rules for an elder to attack a palace disciple?" Yan Shi looked at Yi Xian and said, "It doesn't." Yi Xian smiled and said, "In that case, if little Uncle Master wants to attack me, Hall Master Yan, you will stop him, right?" Yan Shi said softly, "If you didn't go to such extremes earlier, would it have come to this?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "I don't offend others if they don't offend me, but if they offend me, then I'll definitely kill them." Yan Shi stared at Yi Xian for a short while before he said, "Let's go to the ancestor platform." Little Uncle Master and Cao Xiu gazed at Yan Shi when they heard this. Yan Shi spoke indifferently, "These are the rules. Yi Xian can't break the rules and we can't break the rules as well." Little Uncle Master and Cao Xiu fell silent. Yi Xian glanced at Yan Shi and said, "Hall Master Yan, I'm quite surprised. I thought that you would stop at nothing to kill me just like that old geezer." Yan Shi shook his head. "Rules are rules. You can't break them and neither can they. Let's go to the ancestor platform. Xian smiled and said, all right. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the sky. On the other hand, the others left successively. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the entrance of Grand Spirit Palace. At this moment, countless outer court and inner court disciples were gathered here as well. Someone had ascended the ancestor platform again. That wasn't a trivial matter. Moreover, it was Xian who descended the ancestor platform, because he just killed an inner court disciple and an elite disciple. Xian walked slowly towards the ancestor platform before the entrance of Grand Spirit Palace. Meanwhile, Guqing suddenly walked over to Xian's side. He gazed at Xian, hesitated for a moment and then said, "Are you confident?" Xian smiled, "I'm not." Guqing laughed bitterly, "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were that strong. If I knew, then I would have directly recommended you to become an elite disciple." Alas. Xian shook his head and smiled, "It's fine. I think the outer court isn't bad." Guqing sighed once more. Xian didn't say anything else and he just walked towards the ancestor platform. Yanli, who stood by Yanxi's side, suddenly said, "You want to give him a chance." Actually, he knew that Xian wouldn't be able to do anything if Yanxi refused. It should be known that some rules were dead. Yanxi looked at Xian in the distance and said softly, "The enforcement hall can't protect him. Not only the enforcement hall, but even the palace lord might not be able to protect him." Yanli fell silent. If Xian had only killed an inner court disciple, then there would still be room for negotiation. But the problem was that Xian didn't just kill an inner court disciple, he also killed an inner court elder and then he killed an elite disciple. His behavior was truly too vile. Xian had practically incurred the wrath of the masses. He knew that Hall Master Yanxi actually didn't want to kill Xian, because Xian's talent and terror weren't inferior to Li Yaoye. Moreover, Xian's character was suitable for the enforcement hall. The enforcement hall needed such a strong person. Otherwise, how could he intimidate so many experts in Grand Spirit Palace? It should be known that the internal affairs of Grand Spirit Palace were extremely complicated, and many people had backers and connections. Most of the time, the enforcement hall had their hands and feet tied. If Xian entered the enforcement hall with Xian's character and strength, he could definitely intimidate countless people. Therefore, he agreed to let Xian go to the combat ring. After all, it was too much of a pity to get rid of Xian just like that. Moreover, the most important point was that Xian hadn't taken the initiative to provoke anyone. If Xian was really that kind of person who devoured and killed, Yanxi wouldn't give him a chance no matter how monstrous he was. Yanli suddenly said, "If he gets the ancestors' protection, I'm afraid Peak Lord Cao Xiu won't let it go." Yanxi glanced at Cao Xiu in the distance and said indifferently, "What can she do if she doesn't let it go? You and I both know how Qinggu chose Xian. Even if Xian doesn't kill him, I will punish him." Looking down on the entire outer court? What right does he have to look down on the outer court? Didn't you and I also become outer court disciples back then? Yanli smiled slightly. "That's true." Yanxi continued, "Cao Xiu asked for it when she allowed Qinggu to provoke Xian." Yanli sighed softly, "Things shouldn't have turned out this way." As he spoke, he looked at Xian in the distance. "If the ancestor doesn't protect him, what will you do?" Yanxi was expressionless. "Kill him at all costs." Yanli nodded. "Understood." On the other side, Cao Xiu stared at Xian in the distance. "Little junior brother, will the ancestor protect him?" Little martial uncle shook his head. "I don't know." Cao Xiu stared at Xian and said fiercely, "Even if the ancestor protects him, I want him dead." Little martial uncle hesitated for a moment, then said, "I'm afraid it's not that simple." Cao Xiu turned to look at little martial uncle, her eyes scarlet. "My disciple can't die in vain. He absolutely can't die in vain." Little martial uncle sighed softly. He could actually see it very clearly. Great Spirit God Palace didn't want to miss out on a monstrous genius like Xian. Of course, it all depended on the ancestors' attitude. In the distance, under everyone's gaze, Xian slowly stepped onto the ancestral platform. As soon as he stepped foot onto the ancestors' platform, it started trembling violently. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings turned cold. A trace of an aura gradually appeared on the ancestors' platform, and it grew stronger and stronger. In the end, an invisible pressure appeared in the surroundings. On the other hand, a shadow was silently condensing in front of Zhou Xian. Everyone in the surroundings hurriedly bowed respectfully when they saw this figure. Even Yan Shi Chao Xiu and the others bowed slightly. That was an ancestor. Even though it wasn't the true body, it was still an ancestor, so they had to respect it. The shadow in front of Zhou Xian grew more and more material. In the end, an old man appeared in front of Zhou Xian. The old man wore a simple white robe and he looked extremely thin. However, his eyes were extremely spirited. Zhou Xian sized up the old man in front of him. This old man's soul was extraordinarily powerful. If the azure sword devoured it, Zhou Xian hurriedly shook his head when he thought up to this point. What am I thinking? Not to mention whether I can devour it. Even if I can, won't the great spirit god palace fight me to the death? Meanwhile, the old man in front of Zhou Xian sized up Zhou Xian and frowned slightly. Heaven Ascension Stage? Zhou Xian nodded. The old man looked at Zhou Xian. Why are you so weak? Zhou Xian was speechless. Suddenly, the old man seemed to have noticed something, and a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. Wait. As he spoke, he suddenly appeared in front of Zhou Xian and sized up Zhou Xian. There's something wrong with you. Zhou Xian glanced at the old man but did not speak. The old man stared at Zhou Xian. Your bloodline is so strange. I've never seen it before. Zhou Xian was about to speak when the old man suddenly opened his palm. The azure sword in Zhou Xian's body flew out and landed steadily in his hand. When he saw the azure sword, the old man's expression instantly changed and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Who made this sword? Zhou Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, I made it myself. The old man looked at Zhou Xian in shock. I wonder which big shot you are the reincarnation of? Zhou Xian was speechless. Peace, I'm late. I haven't thought of a reason yet. I'm a little panicked now. Number 15 exploded. Chapter 1783. The reincarnation of a big shot. Zhou Xian fell silent. Did this old man misunderstand something? No. Zhou Xian suddenly came to his senses. Who forged this green profound sword? It was Qing. How could a sword forged by Qing be an ordinary sword? Of course not. Putting everything else aside, just the power of the supreme laws within the green profound sword was not something that just anyone could get their hands on. This old man must have seen how extraordinary this sword was. At the thought of this, Zhou Xian smiled. You may not know me. The old man fell silent for a moment before asking, May I know your purpose in coming to the great spiritual palace? Zhou Xian looked around and smiled. I want to find a place to stay. I think the great spiritual palace is a good choice. However, I ran into some trouble in the great spiritual palace. The old man frowned. Trouble? Zhou Xian nodded. I am now an outer disciple of the great spiritual palace. Some people in the great spiritual palace want to kill me. This makes things difficult for me. The old man was confused. How is that possible? Zhou Xian pointed at Chao Xiu in the distance. It's her. She wants to kill me. The old man turned to Chao Xiu. You want to kill this little friend? Chao Xiu's expression turned ugly. She bowed slightly. Ancestor, this person killed an inner disciple. Not only that, but he also killed an inner elder and a legacy disciple. He violated the palace rules first. The old man looked at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian smiled. Ask her why I want to kill them. Chao Xiu stared at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian, don't distort the truth. You, how dare you? The old man suddenly looked at Chao Xiu. Be polite to this little friend. Be polite. Chao Xiu was stunned. It wasn't just Chao Xiu, everyone else was slightly stunned as well. The elder looked at the azure profound sword in his hand. After a long while, a complicated expression flashed across his eyes. He handed the azure profound sword over to Zhou Xian. Little friend, why have you come to my great spiritual god palace? Zhou Xian smiled and said, I just want to find a place to stay, but now it seems that the great spirit god palace does not welcome me. The old man nodded slightly. Understood. As he spoke, he turned and looked towards the depths of the great spiritual palace. Where is the current palace lord? The current palace lord. As soon as he finished speaking, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared not far from the old man. It was the current palace master of the great spiritual palace, Lin Jiang. Lin Jiang looked at the old man and bowed slightly. Ancestor. The old man looked at Lin Jiang. From now on, this little friend is my great spiritual god palace. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. What do you want? Yi Xian blinked. I can do anything, the old man said, apart from the position of palace lord. As soon as this was said, everyone present was shocked. Apart from the palace lord, Yi Xian could choose any position in the great spiritual palace? At this moment at the side, Cao Xiu said in a trembling voice, Ancestor, why is this? The old man glanced at Cao Xiu. Do you have a question? Cao Xiu was shocked and hurriedly lowered her head. I dare not. The old man looked at Lin Jiang. What about you? Lin Jiang glanced at Yi Xian and then sent a voice transmission with celestial qi. Ancestor, can you see that this person is extraordinary? The old man asked in response. Can't you see? Lin Jiang said in a deep voice. This person can fight a saint as a heaven ascension state, so he is indeed extraordinary. However, even so, he is not qualified to be treated like this by the ancestor. Did the ancestor notice something? The old man glanced at Yi Xian. Do you see the sword in his hand? Lin Jiang looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. The sword is? The old man stared at Lin Jiang. This sword contains the power of the supreme law of origin. The supreme law. Hearing this, Lin Jiang's pupils suddenly shrank. He is related to the supreme law. The old man nodded. Not only that, this sword also contains the power of time. This power of time is not ordinary, but the power of the main meridian of the universe. As he spoke, he slowly closed his eyes. Even if this sword was not forged by him, the relationship between the person who forged this sword and him is not ordinary. This kind of person is not someone the great spiritual god palace can provoke. Lin Jiang nodded slightly. Understood. The old man turned to look at Yi Xian. Young friend, have you thought it through? Yi Xian smiled. I will continue to be an outer sect disciple. The old man was slightly taken aback. An outer sect disciple? Yi Xian nodded. I think being an outer sect disciple is not bad. The old man thought about it and nodded. As you wish, young friend. As he spoke, he glanced at Lin Jiang and then gradually became illusory. After a long silence, Lin Jiang looked at Yi Xian. You will be an outer sect disciple? Yi Xian nodded. Lin Jiang nodded slightly. All right. Don't worry, no one will look for trouble with you in the future. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned and vanished. On the ancestor platform, Yi Xian put away the green profound sword and turned to leave. Cao Xiu stared fixedly at Yi Xian. No one knew what she was thinking. Meanwhile, young martial uncle appeared by her side. He hesitated for a moment and said, Let's go and hear what senior brother has to say. As soon as he finished speaking, both of them vanished on the spot. On a certain mountain peak, Cao Xiu and Lin Jiang arrived behind Lin Jiang, and Cao Xiu said coldly, Eldest senior brother, are we going to let him off just like that? Lin Jiang turned to look at Cao Xiu. Don't look for trouble with him again. Otherwise no one can save you. Cao Xiu was shocked and hurriedly asked, Why? Lin Jiang said softly, This person is definitely more terrifying than we imagined. Cao Xiu said solemnly, Who exactly is he? Lin Jiang shook his head. Who he is isn't important anymore. What's important is that even the ancestors are afraid of him. Understand? Cao Xiu's expression was slightly unsightly. Could it be that Qinggu died for nothing? Lin Jiang gazed at Cao Xiu. If you continue, then it won't just be Qinggu who dies, it'll be you who dies as well, and it might even drag the entire great spiritual divine palace down with you. Cao Xiu's eyes were filled with disbelief. How could this be possible? Is he really that terrifying? Young martial uncle spoke as well. Senior brother, what exactly did you and the ancestors discover? Lin Jiang said, He has a sword in his hand, and that sword contains the energy of a supreme law. Moreover, it's in quintessence law. A supreme law. Cao Xiu and young martial uncle were stunned when they heard this. Cao Xiu was filled with disbelief. He's related to a supreme law? Lin Jiang nodded. Cao Xiu's expression grew even more unsightly. A supreme law. Even though the great spiritual divine palace was very strong and was the strongest power in ancient god galaxy, it was truly nothing before a supreme law. Why had the minor spiritual divine palace become a top-rate power all those years ago? It was because their ancestors were related to a supreme law, and the minor spiritual divine palace had relied on this to develop into an extraordinary power. Because no matter if it was the great spiritual divine palace, the battle pavilion or the sky demon kingdom, all of them would give way to the minor spiritual divine palace. A supreme law. No one was unafraid of it. Meanwhile, Lin Jiang spoke again, "Don't go looking for trouble with him. Otherwise no one can save you." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished. Cao Xiu's expression gradually calmed down, and no one knew what he was thinking. Young martial uncle spoke solemnly, "Don't act recklessly." He turned around and left as soon as he finished speaking. A supreme law. Not to mention that Yi Xian had killed Chen Gu. Even if he had killed Li Yaoye, the great spiritual divine palace would not take revenge. What if this fellow's backer was a supreme law? Yi Xian returned to the outer sanctum and continued cultivating. As for Yi Xian, he could be considered to be famous in the great spiritual divine palace. First he killed inner sanctum disciples, then inner sanctum elders, and then he killed true disciples. However, the great spiritual divine palace did not punish him. Some inner sanctum disciples wanted to protest, but they were all suppressed. The hall master of the tribunal council, Yanxi, only had one sentence: "If you don't like Yi Xian, then go and challenge him, a life and death challenge." For a moment, those inner sanctum disciples were silent. That fellow could even fight a sage head-on, so how could they beat him? Gu Qing and the other two felt a little complicated. Because now, the inner sanctum would no longer accept Yi Xian's assessment. In other words, there was no way for Yi Xian to participate in this inner sanctum assessment. Of course, it was not a bad thing. Now that Yi Xian was in the outer sanctum, everyone in the outer sanctum straightened their backs. Looking down on the outer sanctum? Never mind. Go and look for Yi Xian. Yi Xian was now the face of the outer sanctum. As for Yi Xian, he continued to cultivate the heaven ascension state and his sword skills. He did not cultivate his physical body anymore. The main reason was that he did not have a good physical body cultivation method. The cultivation methods that he had in the past could not keep up with his current realm. Therefore he was now focused on cultivating the heaven ascension state and his sword skills. Not only did he want to achieve limitless, but he also wanted to reach the limit. Whether it was his realm or his sword skills. Small heavenly abode. In front of the bamboo house, an old man sat by the lake, his eyes slightly closed, his right hand lightly tapping on the bamboo chair. At this moment, a shadow suddenly appeared not far in front of the old man. The shadow bowed slightly. "Cave master, we have searched all over the heavens and realms, but still have not found any trace of the plain-dressed woman. She may be hiding." He was hiding. After a long silence, the old man said, "What about those forbidden areas?" The shadow said in a low voice, "We have already sent people to inquire. Those forbidden areas all said that they have not seen this person." The old man frowned slightly. "If she is not in those forbidden areas, then where is she hiding?" The shadow shook his head. "I don't know. We have already searched all the places that can be searched and there is no trace of her. Why don't we contact the supreme laws? As long as the supreme laws appear, no matter how strong that woman's concealment technique is, she will still appear." But the old man shook his head. "Forget it. How can we trouble a supreme for such a small matter?" As he spoke, he looked into the distant horizon. "Isn't that Yi Xian close to him? Then we will kill this Yi Xian. I believe that if this Yi Xian wants to die, she will definitely appear." The shadow hesitated, then said, "That Yi Xian is now an outer court disciple of the great spiritual god palace. It is not easy for us to kill him." The old man said indifferently, "He is just an outer court disciple, not a true disciple. Even if he is a true disciple, the great spiritual god palace cannot protect him. Moreover, do you think the great spiritual god palace will become enemies with my small cave for a heaven ascension state?" The shadow thought for a moment, then said, "Probably not." The old man nodded. "Send someone to the great spiritual god palace. Tell them that Yi Xian killed someone from my small spiritual god palace. Ask them to hand over the person." The shadow nodded. "Understood." As he finished speaking, he turned and left. Chapter 1784. A place of cultivation in the starry sky. Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the starry sky with his eyes closed. He'd been studying the space-time Tao every single day during this period of time. Presently he was able to condense 38 rivers of time. Even though it wasn't a lot, he'd grasped the trick of it. Attaining limitless was only a matter of time for him now. Moreover, he noticed that with every river of time he formed, his strength would increase greatly. Presently he was able to overlap 400 sword drawing techniques. He was able to overlap 400 sword drawing techniques without utilizing the energy of his bloodline. In other words, he could go head-on against a saint even without using the green profound sword. However, he wasn't completely confident in his ability to defeat a great saint. But a minor saint wasn't a threat to him anymore. Spacetime. Zhou Xian opened his hands and waved them lightly. Gradually the space around him started to tremble. Countless strands of time energy converged towards him. Gradually the power of time surged around him like a river. The energy of time. Zhou Xian opened his palm, and then countless strands of time energy converged towards his palm. Gradually, a river of time condensed within his palm. It might seem small, but the space within it was extremely large. Because he'd utilized the energy of space. Zhou Xian gazed at the river of time in his hand. After a short moment of silence, he issued a command in his heart. In an instant, the river of time in his hand transformed into a translucent sword. The sword of time. As he gazed at the sword in his hand, a thought silently appeared in Zhou Xian's mind. He glanced at the rivers of time around him and then he closed his eyes slowly. The rivers of time around him started to tremble, and then they gradually condensed into swords. Translucent swords of time. Zhou Xian instantly felt quite excited when he saw this scene. He opened his palm, sheathed the sword of time in his hand and then suddenly pulled it out. Bang! As soon as he pulled it out, the sword of time in his hand shattered. Zhou Xian was struck dumb at the sight of this. Is it so brittle? I'm unwilling. He tried a few more times, but the sword condensed from the energy of time was truly too brittle, and it couldn't endure his drawing technique at all. Zhou Xian frowned. After trying many times it still didn't work. But soon, another thought appeared in his mind. Zhou Xian opened his palm and the sword in his hand flew out. Zhou Xian was stunned. That was because the sword was too fast. How fast? It was so fast that he couldn't even catch a glimpse of it. How could it be so fast? Zhou Xian was puzzled. After studying it for a moment he understood. The reason why the time sword was so fast was because it wasn't just condensed from the power of time, it also contained the power of space. To be precise, it was the sword of time and space. His river of time was different from others because his river of time was built on space. He did not separate the two but instead combined them. And precisely because of this, his heaven ascension boundary was different from other heaven ascension boundaries. Although he was still in the same realm, he was no longer walking the normal realm. He was walking the path of the Qing, flying swords. Zhou Xian decided to study flying swords. With the space-time sword, if he cultivated flying swords, then the flying swords would become very terrifying. Not to mention a little saint, even a great saint might not be able to withstand it. Drawing the sword to determine life and death was explosive. And flying swords were about speed, about surprise and killing in one move. As if thinking of something, he took out the nameless sword technique that he obtained from Shaolin Lang. This nameless sword technique was also a sword technique. And it seemed extraordinary. Zhou Xian began to study the nameless sword technique. After studying it for a moment, Zhou Xian was a little surprised because he found that some of the sword techniques in the nameless sword technique were worth learning, such as drawing the sword. There were a total of 9 ways to draw the sword in the nameless sword technique. Among them was drawing the sword. Similar to his father's sword drawing technique, drawing the sword was about explosive power. That instant of explosive power. However, the drawing of the sword in the nameless sword technique was simply drawing the sword, and there was no superposition method. Without superposition, no matter how powerful the drawing of the sword was, its power was limited. And in addition to drawing the sword, there was another way to draw the sword. Finger sword. Finger sword. Zhou Xian opened his palm and a scabbard appeared in his hand. He held the time box sword in his right hand and put it into the scabbard. After a moment of silence, he suddenly flicked his thumb. A ray of sword light flashed across the field. The ray of sword light was so fast that it could not be seen by the naked eye. Zhou Xian was a little shocked. This was because he realized that after he used the finger sword technique, his speed had really become faster. Finger sword. It was all about one word: fast. Drawing the sword at the fastest speed. He didn't need to use his right hand at all. Holding the sword with his left hand, he could draw the sword with his left hand, and it was a surprise attack. Yi Xian continued to study the nameless sword technique. He found that there were other powerful swordsmen in this world besides Qing'er and his father, and these swordsmen were all worthy for Yi Xian to learn. While Yi Xian was practicing, no one came to disturb him. Dao Yi came twice, but seeing that he was practicing, he chose not to disturb him. Yi Xian, who was concentrating on his practice, was also clear about the path he wanted to take now. Take the path of Qing'er. As for the sword technique, he only had one thought. Kill. It was best to kill the enemy with one move. He didn't need any fancy tricks, the simpler the better. Whether it was the life-terminating sword technique or the flying sword technique, there was only one goal, and that was to kill faster. 3 days later, the incomplete nameless sword technique had been fully understood by Yi Xian. It was actually a powerful sword technique, but in terms of power, it was much weaker than life-terminating sword technique. Not to mention that it was incomplete. Even if it was complete, it would be far inferior to his life-terminating sword technique. It should be said that there was no comparison at all. However, there were many things worth learning from the nameless sword technique. His father and Qing'er were qualified to look down on swordsmen in the world, but Yi Xian was not qualified. There were many swordsmen that Yi Xian could learn from. In the following days, Yi Xian mainly studied the flying sword. He did not look for a powerful flying sword technique, he was preparing to create his own powerful flying sword technique. The process was not that easy, but he enjoyed it very much. While Yi Xian was practicing, an elder from the small grotto heaven came to the great spiritual palace. Spiritual palace. Inside the palace, Lin Jiang glanced at the elder from the small grotto heaven. Elder Jiao, why did you come all the way to the great spiritual palace? Elder Jiao smiled. Palace Master Lin, Cave Master asked me to send his regards to Palace Master Lin. Lin Jiang nodded. It has been 1,000 years since we last met. Is Cave Master Qiu doing well? Elder Jiao smiled. Cave Master is doing well. He fishes and sleeps every day. His life is very comfortable. Lin Jiang nodded. Since he asked you to come here, he must have something to say. Just say it. Elder Jiao nodded. Palace Master Lin, to be honest, I am here for something. Palace Master Lin, did you recently recruit a young man named Yi Xian? Yi Xian. Lin Jiang narrowed his eyes. You are here for him. Elder Jiao nodded. Yes. Lin Jiang looked at Elder Jiao. He is indeed in the great spiritual palace. Elder Jiao said, Palace Master Lin, to be honest, this man is wanted by the small grotto heaven. Lin Jiang frowned. Wanted? Elder Jiao nodded. This man killed my men. We have been looking for him for a long time. He stood up and bowed. Palace Master Lin, please hand this man over to me. I will bring him back. Lin Jiang asked in a deep voice, did he kill someone from your grotto heaven? Elder Jiao nodded. Yes. Not only him, but there is also a lady behind him. She has gone into hiding and we can't find her. As for Yi Xian, please hand him over to me. I will bring him back. Lin Jiang kept quiet. He did not expect Yi Xian to have a grudge against the small grotto heaven. This fella is not easy to deal with. He even killed people from the small grotto heaven. He is now an outer disciple of the great spiritual palace. Lin Jiang said after a moment of silence. Elder Jiao said, Palace Master Lin, this man is not easy to deal with. Moreover, he killed someone from the small grotto heaven. We will not rest until he is dead. Not rest until he is dead. Lin Jiang kept quiet. He was in a dilemma. If he protected Yi Xian, he would be making enemies with the small grotto heaven. Of course, the great spiritual palace was not afraid of the small grotto heaven. However, was it worth it for Yi Xian? Although Yi Xian was an outer disciple, he believed that someone like Yi Xian would leave sooner or later. Therefore, he did not treat Yi Xian as one of his own. However, if he were to hand Yi Xian over just like that, Yi Xian would definitely not cooperate. He might even view the great spiritual palace as an enemy. Elder Jiao suddenly said, Palace Master Lin Jiang, this man and the lady must be killed by the small grotto heaven. He could see it. Lin Jiang was hesitant. Therefore, he showed his determination to the small grotto heaven again. Not far away. Lin Jiang still had not made a decision. Suddenly, a voice rang in his mind. Why don't you let him and Yi Xian deal with it themselves? Lin Jiang said after a moment of silence, Someone summon Yi Xian. Bikudao. Exidi, Xian. In the starry sky cultivation ground. Xian, who was cultivating, suddenly stopped. He turned around and saw Guqing walking towards him slowly. Xian smiled. Elder Guqing, what's the matter? Guqing smiled. I hope I didn't disturb your cultivation? Xian shook his head. No. Guqing nodded. The palace master is looking for you. Xian frowned. The palace master is looking for me? Guqing nodded. Yes. Xian asked. Did he say what's the matter? Guqing shook his head. No. Xian thought for a moment and said, Can I not go? Guqing smiled bitterly. This, Xian smiled. Never mind. I won't put you in a difficult position. He was about to leave when Guqing suddenly said, Someone from the small grotto heaven is here. They might be looking for you. Be careful. Small grotto heaven. Xian was stunned and then he smiled. I understand. Then he vanished on the spot. Spirit God Palace. As soon as Xian walked into the palace, Elder Jiao's gaze descended onto Xian. Lin Jiang looked at Xian and smiled. Xian, this person is Elder Jiao from the small grotto heaven. He said that there's some enmity between you and the small grotto heaven, and he wants to take you back. Elder Jiao stood up and stared at Xian. Xian raised his thumb that held the sword in his left hand. Elder Jiao's head flew into the air. Xian looked at the stunned Lin Jiang. Is there anything else, Palace Master? Lin Jiang. Chapter 1785. Instant kill. Needless to say, Qin Jiang was extremely shocked at this moment. This fellow killed Elder Jiao in an instant? Elder Jiao is a minor saint as well. Moreover, the speed of Xian's flying sword was so fast that even he was a little shocked. It was too fast. Meanwhile, Xian suddenly smiled. Palace Master, if there's nothing else, then I'll be leaving. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. However, he suddenly stopped when he arrived at the door and said, Palace Master, I have no ill intentions towards Great Spiritual Palace, and I don't want to have any bad karma with you. Don't worry, Palace Master, the matter between me and the minor cave heaven won't involve Great Spiritual Palace. Qin Jiang looked at Xian. When are you leaving? All he wanted was for Xian to leave. He felt uneasy that Xian was in Great Spiritual Palace. Xian said with a smile, I can leave now. As he spoke, he opened his palm and a wooden token floated before Qin Jiang. It was the identity token of an outer court disciple. Xian said, From this moment onwards, I have nothing to do with Great Spiritual Palace. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished. Qin Jiang was silent in the hall. Meanwhile, Yanxi suddenly appeared by Qin Jiang's side, and he looked at Xian who was leaving. The ancestor intends to rope him in. Qin Jiang nodded. I know. Yanxi turned to look at Qin Jiang. He's not a bad person. Qin Jiang said softly. He makes me feel uneasy. Moreover, if we choose to keep him, it's equivalent to becoming enemies with the minor cave heaven. Are we going to start a war with the minor cave heaven because of him? Yanxi wanted to say something but hesitated. Qin Jiang said, I know you think he's worth it. But have you ever thought that he has no sense of belonging to Great Spiritual Palace? Perhaps he has other motives for coming to Great Spiritual Palace, or perhaps he just wants to have some fun. Anyway, he's going to leave. Isn't that right? Yanxi sighed softly. Qin Jiang continued, Previously I thought there was still a chance for him to reconcile with the small grotto heaven. However, since he killed Elder Jiao of the small grotto heaven, it means there's no way for them to reconcile. If we let him stay in the divine palace, it would be equivalent to making an enemy out of the heavenly abode. Once the two superforces started a war, the consequences would be unbearable. Therefore, letting him leave is the best choice. Yanxi nodded slightly. If the small grotto heaven and the great spiritual god palace were to start a war, the consequences would be terrifying. Sigh. Yanxi sighed again, feeling that it was quite a pity. Xian was no less talented than Li Yaoye. Moreover, Xian was too suitable to enter the enforcement hall. However, as Qin Jiang had said, the price of keeping Xian alive was too great. Moreover, Xian's heart was clearly not with the great spiritual palace. At this moment, Qin Jiang suddenly said, Send an order to the entire great spiritual palace. Yi Xian is no longer a member of the Great Spiritual Palace. Then he paused for a while and added, everyone in the Great Spiritual Palace is not allowed to provoke this person. He was a little afraid of Yi Xian now. This guy is a freak. He will kill anyone who dares to provoke him. This elder doesn't even know how to teach him. He will get into big trouble in the future. Yi Xian did not leave the Great Spiritual Palace immediately. Instead he went to Exquisite Beauty Peak. In the courtyard, Dao Yi looked at Yi Xian. You're leaving? Yi Xian smiled. Yes. Dao Yi said, I'll go with you. Yi Xian shook his head. Stay here and cultivate. This place is not suitable for me, but it is suitable for you. Dao Yi shook his head. If you're not here, what's the point of me staying here? Yi Xian smiled. Stay here first. When the time comes, I'll find you a powerful master. Dao Yi was a little curious. A powerful master? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Dao Yi blinked. How powerful? Yi Xian said, the very, very powerful kind. And it suits you the best. In fact, he wanted to find the supreme law now. Unfortunately, he could not find it. He could not sense the existence of the supreme law at all. After a moment of silence, Dao Yi said, then I'll wait for you. Yi Xian smiled. All right. Stay here and cultivate. If you're bullied, come and find me. Dao Yi shook his head. I came in with you. No one will dare to bully me. Yi Xian nodded. Take care. After that, he was about to leave. At this moment, Dao Yi suddenly said, be careful. Yi Xian smiled. I will. After that, he rode on his sword and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Dao Yi looked at the sword light in the sky. After a long time, she shook her head and smiled. Then she turned and left. After leaving the Great Spiritual God Palace, Yi Xian went straight to Glittering Jewels Pavilion. He wanted to continue studying flying swords. Although he had killed a minor saint in an instant, he felt that it was not enough. His flying swords could be faster. Study. He wanted to find powerful sword techniques, especially those flying swords. He wanted to push his flying swords to the limit. As soon as he arrived at Glittering Jewels Pavilion, Miss Amo appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Amo, is Miss Glittering Jewels here? Amo shook her head. No. Yi Xian asked. Where can I find her? Amo hesitated. I'll contact her. Yi Xian smiled. Thank you. Amo shook her head. You're welcome. As she spoke, she took out a voice transmission talisman and crushed it. After a few breaths of time, the space beside Yi Xian suddenly trembled. In the next moment, a woman walked out. It was Xiao Linlang. Xiao Linlang looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, we meet again. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Glittering Jewels, I don't come to you for no reason. I came to look for you this time to ask for your help. Xiao Linlang looked at Yi Xian. What help? Yi Xian said in a low voice. I want to find a powerful sword technique. It's best if it's the flying sword type. It wasn't easy to create a sword technique that belonged to him. Although his flying sword was fast enough, it wasn't fast enough. Therefore he wanted to use the strengths of others to improve his own sword technique. Xiao Linlang frowned. Sword technique. Yi Xian nodded. Do you have one? Xiao Linlang thought for a moment. I don't. But I know a place that has it. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, where? Xiao Linlang looked at Yi Xian. One of the forbidden areas, North Cliff Sword Ruins. Yi Xian frowned. North Cliff Sword Ruins? Xiao Linlang nodded. That's a forbidden area. That nameless sword technique was obtained from there. However, even a great sage doesn't dare to go too deep into that place. Yi Xian asked in a low voice. Is it very dangerous? Xiao Linlang nodded. It's not an ordinary kind of danger. Not only does that place have a powerful sword formation, but it also has a strange and mysterious corrosive power. Even a sage's body can't withstand it. The level of danger there is second only to the other forbidden area, God's Graveyard. Yi Xian was curious. God's Graveyard? Xiao Linlang smiled. Legend has it that an ancient god fell there, so it's also called God's Graveyard. In any case, it's very dangerous. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Miss Linlang, what kind of place is this North Cliff Sword Ruins that you mentioned? Xiao Linlang said, there used to be a swordsman sect there. However, for some reason it gradually declined. In the end, it became a forbidden area. As for the history of that place, very few people knew. That's because they're not from the same era as us. Xian smiled. I know. Xiao Linlang looked at Xian. You're going? Xian nodded. I'm going to look around. By the way, Miss Linlang, where is that place? Xiao Linlang asked in a low voice. You really want to go? Xian smiled. Do I look like I'm joking? Xiao Linlang said. I'll go with you. Xian was stunned. You're going with me? Xiao Linlang smiled. Am I not welcome? Xian smiled. Of course not. I'm going to look for sword techniques. What are you going for, Miss Linlang? To look for treasures? Xiao Linlang smiled. First, to look for treasures. Second, I'm very curious. I want to know more about the North Cliff Sword ruins. What do you think? Xian laughed. Of course. Let's go now. Xiao Linlang nodded. All right. With that, the two disappeared into the horizon. In the starry sky, Xian flew on his sword with Xiao Linlang beside him. Xian suddenly smiled. Miss Linlang, they say that you and Li Yaoye are the most talented people in the great spiritual god palace. Xiao Linlang shook her head. I'm nothing. The real geniuses are Li Yaoye and Wang Zhan from the Battle God Pavilion. Xian frowned. Wang Zhan? Xiao Linlang nodded. A hot-tempered person. However, he's very strong. I heard that he's the most talented person in the history of the Battle God Pavilion. With that, she smiled. In this era there are many geniuses. Young Master Yi. Xian was about to speak when Xiao Linlang suddenly smiled. Young Master Yi, do you want to spar? Spar. Xian shook his head and smiled. No. Xiao Linlang smiled. Why? Xian smiled and said, my sword skills are all for killing. If I don't have a murderous intent, the power of my sword skills isn't that strong. If I had a murderous intent, Miss Linlang and I have no enmity, why would I have a murderous intent? Xiao Linlang glanced at Xian. I understand. Sword techniques. Just to kill. Xian asked again. Miss Linlang, is there a strong swordsman in the ancient god galaxy? Xiao Linlang said, yes. A female swordsman from the outside world. She's very strong. A female swordsman. Xian frowned. Could it be the Sword Heart from the Sword Alliance? At this moment the two suddenly stopped. Xian frowned. He turned his head and looked in the distance. In the depths of the starry sky there was a sword ray tearing the starry sky. As Xian was puzzled, the sword ray landed in front of him. The sword ray dissipated and a woman appeared in front of Xian. Xian looked at the woman. You are. The woman stared at Xian. Why are you like this? Don't you return what you borrowed? Xian was stunned. He said, I borrowed something and don't return it? Miss, I don't know you. Don't talk nonsense. The woman looked at Xian. You still don't want to admit it. I really don't know you. Xian said solemnly. The woman said, if you borrow it, what do you want? Xian was speechless. Miss, I really don't know you and I've never borrowed anything from you. Xian may be shameless at times but my character is still all right. I've never borrowed something and not returned it. The woman stared at Xian. If I did, what would you do? Xian smiled and said, if I borrowed something from you and didn't return it, I will compensate you 10 times. The woman nodded. I'm relieved to hear that. As she spoke, she opened her palm and a sword flew out from Xian's body. It was that azure sword. The girl held the green sword and looked at Xian 10 times. Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, you were too hasty. Chapter 1786. Xian did not expect that the woman in front of him was the owner of the green sword. That was really awkward. The woman looked at Xian. Why didn't you return the sword? Xian smiled awkwardly. Miss, this is a misunderstanding. The woman was expressionless. If I didn't come looking for you, you wouldn't have returned it. Am I right? Xian hurriedly shook his head. I didn't think so. The woman sneered. You didn't think so? You might not have thought so, but you've already done so. Xian. The woman sheathed her sword and said, you're from the Sword Alliance. Xian sized up the woman and said in shock, you're Jianxin? The woman frowned. You know me? Xian hurriedly said, so it's senior sister. Hello senior sister, I'm Xian, I just joined the Sword Alliance. The woman glanced at Yi Xian and quickly frowned. Your bloodline. With that she walked in front of Yi Xian and placed her right hand on Yi Xian's shoulder. Boom. In an instant the blood in Yi Xian's body boiled. The woman glanced at Yi Xian. You're the sword master's son. Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Jianxing was silent for a moment. Remember to return the things you borrow next time. Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. All right. Jianxing nodded. It's fine. I'm leaving. With that she turned and left. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior sister, are you interested in going to the Northern Cliff Sword Mausoleum? Jianxing frowned. You want to go to the Northern Cliff Sword Mausoleum? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Jianxing shook her head. It's dangerous there. It's better not to go. Yi Xian smiled. I'll go and explore. Jianxing thought for a moment and said, All right. As she spoke she glanced at Xiao Linlang. Miss Linlang. Xiao Linlang laughed. Miss Xianxin, long time no see. Yi Xian was a little surprised. You know each other? Xiao Linlang nodded. I once invited Miss Xianxin to be my guest. Yi Xian smiled and said, I see. Xiao Linlang smiled and said, Let's go. The three of them continued on their way. An hour later the three of them arrived at the North Cliff Sword Mausoleum. The Mausoleum of Swords was at the bottom of a cliff. The cliff was so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen, and it was shrouded in clouds and mist, causing it to reveal a mysterious feeling. Next to the cliff, Xiao Linlang looked down and said softly, The Mausoleum of Swords is below us. And in these clouds, there is an extremely powerful sword formation. Even a great sage wouldn't dare to barge in. Yi Xian said softly, This place used to be a powerful sect. Xiao Linlang nodded. Yes. And it might have been a swordsman's sect. However, the sword chi here is too strong. We don't dare to go deep into the underground mountain range. The sword chi was too strong. Yi Xian blinked. Are you sure? Xiao Linlang nodded, her expression grave. Even I wouldn't dare to go deep into it. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. Damn it. What was he least afraid of? It was sword chi. The invincible sword physique. Although he no longer cultivated his physical body, the invincible sword physique was still there. Moreover, with his current mastery of the sword Dao, the invincible sword physique was extraordinarily strong. He had never fallen behind on the invincible sword physique, nor had he given up on it. This was what Qing'er had taught him. At this thought Yi Xian could not help but want to go down and absorb it. Not much. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as crown prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The speaker was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this time, a timid voice suddenly rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a crown prince. Why do you want to remove him for no reason? The Great Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a matter of the clan, why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look directly at the Great Elder, but she did not leave. Instead she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed again to the elders on both sides. Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan and his life is uncertain. But the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove him from the crown prince position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly roared. It's not up to a little girl like you to decide whether to remove him or not. Men, drag her away. At this moment the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder said coldly, then flog 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he is fighting for the clan, but the clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang, and he knew that this was his chance to show off. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the crown prince position, and it is everyone's wish. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up, but she did not cry and only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed, "I'm Zhang Mu, greeting the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded, "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply, "I'm willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince, even if I have to die 10,000 times. Yi Lang nodded slightly, "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show any mercy, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. Immediately he grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe and the robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. This person was Yi Xian who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his expression was frighteningly dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak, when Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu once more. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and snarled, "Your man?" As he spoke he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out, "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage, and in the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. "Why?" At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look at the great elder, but she did not leave. Instead she plucked up her courage and entered the ancestral hall. She bowed again to the elders on both sides. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether he discards his position or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yilang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder replied coldly, then flog her 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yilang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard laughed coldly. Young Master Yilang inherits the title of prince and it's the wish of everyone. What are you shouting about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yiling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yilang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yilang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince, even if it means death. Yilang nodded slightly. Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show mercy, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to see something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe and the robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yilang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yilang and just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yiling did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu once more. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and snarled, your man? As he spoke he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping! Chapter 1787. Sword Dao Intent. After Yi Xian withdrew the green-clothed man's sword Dao Intent, the mysterious sword Dao Intent in the distance started trembling slightly, and it seemed to be fearful. Yi Xian was quite shocked as he gazed at the mysterious sword Dao Intent. How formidable! This sword Dao Intent wasn't as strong as his father's, but it was much stronger than his own. So he couldn't devour it at all. There really was always someone stronger in this world. Xiao Linlang, who stood by Yi Xian's side, took a deep and long glance at Yi Xian. The sword Dao Intent in Yi Xian's hand made her feel even more dangerous. Meanwhile, Yi Xian walked towards the mysterious sword Dao Intent in the distance, but the sword Dao Intent immediately retreated. This wasn't fear any longer, it was fear. Yi Xian stopped and gazed at the sword Dao Intent in his hand. Father, you're amazing. As he spoke, he gazed at the sword Dao Intent. I presume you have a spirit. Can we have a chat? Meanwhile, the mysterious sword Dao Intent had suddenly transformed into a woman. The woman wore a white dress and had a petite figure. She just stared at Yi Xian with a vigilant gaze. Yi Xian smiled. Miss, what's your name? The woman glanced at the strand of sword Dao intent in Yi Xian's hand and didn't speak. Yi Xian smiled. I'm Yi Xian. As he spoke, he put the sword Dao intent away. After he did, he noticed that the woman's expression had become much more relaxed. Yi Xian asked, Miss, what's your name? The woman glanced at Yi Xian. I don't have a name. I don't have a name. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, Then I'll give you one. You'll be called Lingxi. What do you think? The woman was speechless. Jianxin and Xiao Linlang gazed at Yi Xian as if they were looking at a monster. Yi Xian grinned. Miss Lingxi, are you alone? The woman looked at Yi Xian. Outsiders are not allowed in here. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? The woman said nothing. Yi Xian glanced at the mountain range in the distance. Can I go in? The woman immediately shook her head. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then he walked in front of the woman. He took out a stick of candied hawthorn and gave it to the woman. Try it. Leng Xinxin and Xiao Linlang were dumbfounded. What was going on? The woman glanced at the candied fruit in Yi Xian's hand and said, What's that? Yi Xian said seriously, An ancient god-grade spirit item, have a taste. The woman hesitated for a moment then took the candied fruit. She opened the wrapper and gently licked it. She frowned slightly as if she felt that it was not bad. She licked it again. Yi Xian asked softly, Is it delicious? The woman took a look at the tonghulu and then looked at Yi Xian. Delicious. Leng Xinxin, Xiao Linlang, Yi Xian said with a smile. Lingxi, how long have you been here? Lingxi licked the candied hawthorn and then she shook her head. I don't remember. Yi Xian smiled. Then have you ever thought of leaving? Lingxi shook her head. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Lingxi said, Master asked me to stand guard here and not let anyone in. Yi Xian was slightly curious. Where's your master? Lingxi turned to look at the mountain range. In there. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then he said, Is she still alive? Lingxi shook her head. I don't know. Yi Xian glanced at the mountain range. Can I go in? Lingxi immediately shook her head. Master said that no one can go in. Yi Xian blinked. Did she say that your friends can't go in? Lingxi looked at Yi Xian. Friends? Yi Xian nodded. We're friends, right? Lingxi hesitated for a moment and then she said, What's a friend? Yi Xian was speechless. This little girl has probably never been to the outside world at all. She's like a blank piece of paper. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he withdrew a skewer of candied hawthorn and passed it to Lingxi. She didn't refuse and just took it. Yi Xian smiled. What do you think of me? Lingxi gazed at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian withdrew another skewer of candied hawthorn and passed it to her. Lingxi hesitated for a moment and then she took it and said, A good person. A good person. The nearby Leng Xinxin and Xiao Linlang were dumbstruck when they heard this. She's a good person? That's possible? Yi Xian smiled. Lingxi, do you want to meet your master? Lingxi immediately nodded. Yes. Yi Xian grinned. Then let's go see him. All right. Lingxi hesitated for a moment and then she shook her head. He asked me to stand on guard here. Yi Xian asked. Did he say that he wouldn't allow you to leave? Lingxi's brows knit together slightly. After a short moment she shook her head. No. Yi Xian roared with laughter. Then let's go look for him. As soon as he finished speaking, he grabbed Lingxi's arm and walked towards the distance. Lingxi was slightly resistant at the beginning, but she didn't continue after she struggled to no avail. Leng Xinxin and Xiao Linlang were stunned behind them. Xiao Linlang remained silent for a short moment before she said, Is it done just like that? Leng Xinxin gazed at Yi Xian who stood in the distance. Amazing. Xiao Linlang laughed bitterly. Every time they came here they would be suppressed by the sword Dao intent here. It wasn't just her, many others were stopped here as well. Because the sword Dao intent was truly too strong, and even a great saint didn't dare go head-on against it. Yet at this moment Yi Xian had resolved it with a few skewers of candied hawthorn. Xiao Linlang's smile grew even more bitter when she thought up to here. If I knew this would happen I would have bought some candied hawthorn. Meanwhile Leng Xinxin suddenly said, Let's go. Let's go take a look at this mysterious place. As she spoke she started walking towards the distance. Xiao Linlang shook her head and followed her as well. Lingxi was slightly anxious in the distance. Yi Xian smiled. Your master won't blame you. Lingxi turned around to gaze at Yi Xian. She hesitated for a moment before she said, Master's temper isn't really good. I'm very afraid that she'll get angry. Yi Xian spoke softly, You've definitely been standing guard there for a very long time, right? Lingxi shook her head. I don't remember. Yi Xian sighed softly in his heart. Once anything had intelligence, it was equivalent to having a life of its own. Even if it was a strand of sword Dao intent. Presently, Lingxi wasn't merely a strand of sword Dao intent. Just like Qing had merely been a clone all those years ago. But what happened in the end? Her strength had far surpassed her main body. Once she possessed intelligence, then she would have a limitless future. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the depths of the mountain range. There was a door there and there were 3 words inscribed on it. Ruins of Sword Sect. The Ruins of Sword Sect. Up the door was a limestone staircase that stretched on endlessly. Yi Xian was just about to enter, but Lingxi stopped on the spot and didn't dare enter. Yi Xian smiled, It's fine. If your master gets angry, then I'll stop him for you. Lingxi glanced at Yi Xian. Master is very strong. You won't be able to stop him. Yi Xian said with a smile, Do you want to see your master? Lingxi nodded. Yi Xian said, Then let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, he pulled Lingxi up the mountain. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the peak of the mountain. There was an enormous palace there, and there were countless other halls in the mountain range behind the palace. The Ruins of Sword Sect was clearly extraordinary based on its scale. On the other hand, Yi Xian sensed numerous remnant strands of sword qi and sword Dao intent in the Ruins of Sword Sect. However, they weren't as strong as Lingxi. Yi Xian led Lingxi towards a hall in the distance. Meanwhile, Lingxi suddenly stopped and spoke in a trembling voice, Master's aura. Master's aura. Yi Xian gazed at the hall in the distance. He's in there? Lingxi nodded, Yes. Yi Xian grinned, Let's go take a look. As he spoke, he pulled Lingxi towards the hall. Lingxi spoke with a trembling voice, I'm afraid. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Something isn't right. Logically speaking, the sword Dao intent belongs to that mysterious expert, so it shouldn't be so afraid of him. Meanwhile, Xiao Linlang suddenly spoke solemnly, Be careful. Yi Xian nodded. At this moment he felt that the atmosphere was slightly off as well. He gazed at the hall in the distance and he fell silent for a short moment before he said, We're already here. Let's go take a look. As he spoke, he led the 3 of them over to the hall. There was an incomplete statue before the hall. The upper half of the statue had fallen to the ground, and the cut was smooth like a mirror. Obviously, it had been slashed apart by a sword. A woman was sitting on the ground within the hall. Her long hair hung loosely on her shoulders and she just sat there without moving at all. Her hair was white. Besides that, a man was lying on the ground in front of her, and he was completely devoid of any aura. Lingxi spoke in a trembling voice when she saw the woman, Master. The woman didn't answer her. Yi Xian spoke softly, Senior. Right at this moment, the woman suddenly opened her palm. The green profound sword flew out from within Yi Xian's body and fell into her grasp. She gazed at it for a long time before she said, Who forged this sword? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, My younger sister. The woman stood up, turned around and walked over to Yi Xian. Your younger sister? Yi Xian nodded, Yes. The woman stared at Yi Xian for a short while before she said, Do you need something? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, I came here to look for a master. The woman said, I don't teach anyone. As soon as she finished speaking, she let go of the sword, and it returned to Yi Xian's grasp. After that, she turned around, walked over to the meditation cushion, and sat down without speaking another word. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, Xiao Linlang suddenly said, Why don't you try using candied fruits? Yi Xian's face darkened. Try using candied fruits? He didn't want to be beaten to death. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, Then I'll be taking my leave. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Since she didn't want to teach him, then he would definitely not shamelessly beg her. The main reason was that she didn't seem like someone who was easy to talk to. He might be able to deal with her if she was a single woman, but she clearly had a close relationship with the man on the ground. Suddenly, the man in front of the woman said, Young friend, save me. Save me. As soon as these words were spoken, Yi Xian was stunned. He turned around to look at the man on the ground, but the man's eyes were slightly closed and didn't move at all. There was no aura. Meanwhile, another voice resounded from within the man's body. "Young friend, save me." Chapter 1788. Yi Xian glanced at the man. He was sure this man did not have any aura. Xiao Linlang suddenly exclaimed, "Soul! Soul!" Yi Xian looked at Xiao Linlang. Xiao Linlang stared fixedly at the man. "His soul is sealed inside his body." Yi Xian turned his head to look at the man. He took a closer look at the man. Soon he found that there was indeed a soul in the man's body. The white-haired woman beside him remained calm, not saying a word. Yi Xian felt awkward. This was obviously done by this woman. Why would she do that? He did not dare to ask too many questions. Yi Xian collected his thoughts. Let's go. It was better not to meddle in other people's business. Xiao Linlang nodded hastily. She also wanted to leave. This white-haired woman's sword will was already so terrifying. How could her body not be heaven-defying? Up until now, she still could not sense this white-haired woman's aura. She might have already reached the ancient god realm. Just as the three of them were about to leave, the man's voice sounded again. "Little friend, please wait." Yi Xian quickened his pace. What a joke, he did not want to meddle in other people's business. At this time, the body suddenly trembled violently and the man's voice sounded again. "Little friend, please save me. I beg you. If little friend is willing to help, I am willing to give you all the sword skills and mantras of the ruins of sword sect." Yi Xian pretended not to hear. The white-haired woman suddenly said, "Wait." Yi Xian's footsteps halted and he turned to the white-haired woman with a smile. "Senior, this is your business, it has nothing to do with me." The white-haired woman looked at Yi Xian. "Wait." Yi Xian. The white-haired woman looked at the man in front of her and she lightly tapped his forehead. Boom. A soul floated out from the body. The white-haired woman looked at the man's soul. "Do you really not want to be with me?" The man smiled bitterly. "Yi, can you let me go? You've already imprisoned me for tens of thousands of years. What else do you want?" The white-haired woman glared at the man. "Didn't you tell me that you would always be with me? Aren't we together now?" The man spoke in a deep voice. "Yi, I know that I have let you down. But you've already imprisoned me for 10,000 years. Isn't that enough?" "How is that enough?" The woman suddenly roared. Boom. The entire hall exploded, and Yi Xian and the other two were sent flying several thousand zhang away. The powerful sword qi wreaked havoc between the heavens and the earth, as if it wanted to cut the heavens and the earth into pieces. It was extremely terrifying. Yi Xian stared at the woman in the distance, completely dumbfounded. So fierce. At this moment, there were no less than a dozen sword wounds on his body. His invincible sword body actually failed at this moment. This woman's attainments in the sword Dao were more than 10 times more terrifying than he had imagined. Beside Yi Xian, Xiao Linlong's expression was solemn like never before. This woman's cultivation was at least ancient god realm. Not only that, but she was also a swordsman. In the distance, the woman glared fixedly at the man, her eyes scarlet. 10,000 years? Do you think that's enough? Do you think it's enough? The man roared. If you think it's not enough, then kill me. I beg you, kill me. Don't torture me. The woman sneered. Kill you? Isn't that too easy for you? The man roared. What do you want? The woman glared at the man. I want you to wish you were dead. The man spat venomously. I betrayed you. I betrayed you. Because I don't love you, I never loved you. I was only with you because I wanted to toy with you. The woman's expression was strangely calm. Don't worry, I won't kill you. But the man completely collapsed. At the side, Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before saying, Senior, I still have matters to attend to. We'll be taking our leave. With that said, he turned and ran. It was better not to get involved in such matters of the heart. Right at this moment, a strand of sword force locked onto Yi Xian. Yi Xian said helplessly, Senior, I don't really want to interfere in your matters. The white-haired woman gazed at Yi Xian. I didn't ask you to interfere. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. Then what do you mean, Senior? The white-haired woman took a step forward, and she'd arrived in front of Yi Xian as soon as her foot descended. Yi Xian was secretly on guard. The white-haired woman stared at Yi Xian. help me do something. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, tell me what it is. The white-haired woman opened her palm and a wooden token appeared in her hand. Yi Xian was slightly curious. What's this? The white-haired woman gazed at the wooden token in her hand. Soul wood. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. There's a soul in there? The white-haired woman said, Hi sons. Yi Xian. In the distance the man suddenly said in a trembling voice, Ai, what did you say? The white-haired woman turned to look at the man, her expression unusually cold. Surprised? Surprised? The man said in a trembling voice, You didn't kill our son back then. Yi Xian was speechless. Damn it. What kind of weird family was this? It was comparable to Tianye's family. Thinking of Tianyi, Yi Xian couldn't help but curse. What kind of stupid thing is this? Tianyi. Out of so many enemies, only Tianyi had left a deep impression on him. The white-haired woman looked at the man. That's my son. The man walked in front of the white-haired woman, his throat rolling. I was wrong. I was really wrong. You can do whatever you want to me, just let our son go, okay? The white-haired woman looked at the man in front of her. I used to love you so much. For you, I gave up the position of the family's heir, and was willing to roam the world with you, but what about you? When I was pregnant, you hooked up with your junior sister. Saying this, she smiled sadly. I was really blind. Hearing this, Yi Xian couldn't help but look at the man. Damn, this man was too much of a scumbag. How could he do such a thing? The man hurriedly said, it's my fault, I let you down. Thousands of mistakes, it's all my fault, you just let our son go, okay? The white-haired woman looked at the man. I feel that his life in this world is a kind of pain. The man directly knelt down. Please let him go. He's innocent. This is an adult's matter, not a child should be involved. Saying this, he fiercely kowtowed. At the side, Yi Xian couldn't help but say, Senior, can I say a few words? The white-haired woman turned to look at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian said in a deep voice, I can understand your feelings, but the matter between adults really shouldn't involve a child. I know a friend, his name is God Yi, and his father is just like this man in front of you, a real bastard. And because of his parents, his life has been miserable. Worse than mine. So if you want to punish this heartless man, I don't think it's a problem. But it shouldn't involve the child. Parents quarrel, the child suffers. With all due respect, such parents are simply trash. The man at the side quickly said, This little brother is right. If you're angry, punish me. I'm willing to be imprisoned by you forever, just let the child go, okay? After a long silence, the white-haired woman placed the soul tablet in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. This? The white-haired woman looked at Yi Xian. Help me find a good home for him, let him rebuild his physical body and live an ordinary life. Hearing that, the man at the side suddenly breathed a sigh of relief, and his entire body went limp. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Senior, won't you accompany him to grow up? The white-haired woman slowly closed her eyes. I don't want to and I don't dare. Because when I see him, I can't stop the hatred in my heart. I'll hurt him. Yi Xian sighed in his heart. He suddenly thought of God Ye's mother, Yi Lingtian. She was also a woman who had been hurt by love, and she was also so extreme. Do all women become extreme after being scum? Yi Xian sighed again. I have to pay attention to my relationships in the future. Otherwise, it might be a big problem in the future. I can't have too many wives. 10 or so should be enough. At that moment, the white-haired woman suddenly said, In return, I'll teach you everything I've learned in my life. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, even if you don't teach me your sword techniques, I'll still help you. The white-haired woman nodded slightly, and then she pressed her fingers together and pointed, and a ray of white light entered the space between Yi Xian's brows. Boom. In an instant, countless pieces of information surged into Yi Xian's mind. A moment later, the white-haired woman withdrew her right hand, looked up at the horizon and said, I started cultivating the sword at the age of 20, and was invincible at the age of 30. I've never met a worthy opponent in my entire life. With a sword in hand, I'm invincible. As she spoke, she looked at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand, and a strong desire to fight flashed in her eyes. After seeing this sword today, I finally know that such a powerful swordsman exists in the world. I want to fight the person who created this sword. Fight Qing, Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Senior, I don't know where she is. The white-haired woman smiled. I'll do it. As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and the green profound sword appeared in her hand. She slowly closed her eyes, and the green profound sword trembled violently in her hand. A short moment later, the white-haired woman suddenly looked up at the horizon. I found her. Found her? Yi Xian looked up into the sky, but he saw nothing. At some unknown place, a woman had suddenly stopped. It was the woman in a plain dress. She tilted her head slightly and she seemed to be looking at something. The white-haired woman smiled proudly in front of the mausoleum of swords. No one has ever been able to withstand a single strike of my sword since I achieved success in the Tao of the sword. Be careful, Your Excellency. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly took a step forward and slashed with her sword. The sword splits the universe. In an instant, an enormous rift with no end in sight appeared in the sky. This sword strike couldn't be stopped by time, space, or the laws of the universe. It had directly split the entire universe apart. Meanwhile, a shadow slashed down from the sky above the woman in a plain dress. As soon as the sword slashed down, the star region around the woman in a plain dress started to burn. P.S. It erupted prematurely. Because of yesterday's update, I was cursed so badly. It's fine if they scolded me. They even scolded my family and they scolded me viciously. That kind of feeling is really hard to understand. It only takes 2 minutes to read a few chapters, but it takes a whole day to write. I can really understand if they're unhappy with it and complain a little. But scolding my whole family, I really can't understand it. How much hatred does one have to scold people with such vicious words? Some people's hearts are really scary. If you don't do what they want, they really want you to go to hell. Chapter 1789. Yi Xian's expression changed at the instant the white-haired woman attacked. At this moment he finally realized that he'd underestimated the white-haired woman. He'd severely underestimated her. Her attainments in the sword Dao were much more formidable than he'd imagined. Yi Xian looked up, but he couldn't see Qing at all. With his current strength, it was impossible for his naked eye to traverse through stellar regions. The woman in a plain dress gazed at the image that slashed towards her, and a wisp of disdain arose on the corners of her mouth. What a waste of my time. As soon as she finished speaking, she drew her sword and slashed, and then she turned around and left. The image shattered. In the next moment, not too far away from Yi Xian, a ray of light pierced through the center of the white-haired woman's forehead. Bang! The white-haired woman's figure vanished bit by bit. Instant kill. The white-haired woman's gaze was slightly dazed as she stood before Yi Xian. She'd been instantly killed. Yi Xian remained silent. Qing had won. Moreover, it was the invincible Qing. On the other hand, Leng Xinxin and Xiao Linlang were beyond shocked. The person behind Yi Xian had instantly killed the white-haired woman. Moreover, they were countless stellar regions apart. Right at this moment, the white-haired woman who stood before Yi Xian spoke softly. What's her name? Yi Xian glanced at the white-haired woman. Tianming. Tianming. The white-haired woman muttered, How formidable. Yi Xian glanced at the ray of light between her brows, and he hesitated for a moment before he said, Would you be able to live if I retract that ray of light? The white-haired woman shook her head. I'm already dead. Yi Xian sighed softly. He knew that Qing wasn't like his older brother. He knew that Qing was different from his older brother. The white-haired woman suddenly smiled. That's fine as well. Yi Xian looked at the white-haired woman. The white-haired woman softly said, As a swordsman, dying by the sword is the best ending for a swordsman. As she spoke, she looked at the soul wood token in Yi Xian's hand. Please. With that, she slowly closed her eyes. At this moment, her body was disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. At this time, the man beside her suddenly said in a trembling voice, Ai, I'm sorry. The woman did not open her eyes, nor did she reply. Directly ignored. Gradually, the woman disappeared bit by bit. Soon, the woman completely disappeared. After she completely disappeared, a jade hairpin slowly fell to the ground. When he saw the jade hairpin, the man felt as if he had suffered a heavy blow. In an instant, countless scenes surged into his mind. Do you like this jade hairpin? I like it. Ai is the most beautiful person in the world. I don't deserve you. Lin Lang, I will only marry you in this life. But uncle doesn't agree. Then I'll go with you. You're the crown prince. Not even 1/10,000th of Lin Lang. I will not let you down in this life. In front of Yi Xian, the man looked as if he had lost his soul. After a while he started laughing and crying. Yi Xian sighed softly. Perhaps the two of them had really been in love. However, the man in front of him had still let Ai down in the end. At this moment the man suddenly looked at Yi Xian. He opened his palm and an illusory xiaota floated in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Here this is? The man said, all the treasures of the ruins of Sword Sect. Little brother, it's yours now. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, she didn't kill you, which means that she... The man shook his head. You don't understand. She didn't kill me not because she still loves me but because she has let go of me. Yi Xian sighed again. The man glanced at the wood soul token in Yi Xian's hand. Little brother, please. As he spoke, his soul directly ignited. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. He hurriedly said, Senior Yu. The man looked at the jade hairpin in his hand and said softly, I owe her. As he spoke, his entire soul directly ignited. In less than a few breaths, it was completely incinerated. Dead. Yi Xian and the other two were silent. After a long time, Xiao Lin Lang suddenly said, this is not a bad thing for them. Leng Xinxin nodded. The two of them are torturing each other as long as they are alive. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Indeed. At this moment, Leng Xinxin suddenly looked at Yi Xian. You have to be careful. Yi Xian was a little confused. What about me? Leng Xinxin said, it's very easy for you to win a woman's heart with your flowery ways. Don't deceive a woman's feelings for no good reason in the future. Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Xian was just about to speak when he seemed to have thought of something and he suddenly turned around. Ling Shi was standing not too far away, and tears were flowing incessantly from her face. The white-haired woman soared Dao intent. Yi Xian walked over to Ling Shi, hesitated for a moment and then said, don't cry. To her she has been freed. Ling Shi lowered her head slightly and her voice trembled as she said, what should I do now? Yi Xian smiled, why don't you come with me? Ling Shi gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled, are you willing? Ling Shi was slightly hesitant. Yi Xian added, you have as many candied haws as you want. Ling Shi immediately nodded, yes. Yi Xian was quite speechless. I'm actually not as charming as candied haws. Xiao Lin Lang was even more speechless. This fellow actually tricked a little girl who's comparable to a great saint just like that. Even though Ling Shi was only a strand of sword Dao intent, her strength was sufficient to kill a great saint. Ordinary great saints couldn't compare to her at all. Besides that, this fellow had even obtained the inheritance of the white-haired woman's sword Dao. Most importantly, Yi Xian had obtained all the treasures of the ruins of Sword Sect. How terrifying were the treasures of an entire sect. What a huge profit. Even though she wanted it as well, she didn't have the qualifications. After all, those two only acknowledged Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly smiled, Miss Xinxin, Miss Lin Lang, let's go. Both of them nodded. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly withdrew a spatial ring and passed it to Xiao Lin Lang. Miss Lin Lang, this is for you. Xiao Lin Lang glanced at it, and there were over 1,000,000 eternal divine crystals within the spatial ring. Those were eternal divine crystals. Even a great saint would need them for cultivation. Not to mention an individual, even a super force like the great spiritual god palace might not be able to gather over 1,000,000 eternal divine crystals in a short period of time. Xiao Lin Lang looked at Yi Xian. You're giving them to me? Yi Xian smiled. We're friends, aren't we? After looking at Yi Xian for a long time, Xiao Lin Lang smiled. I understand. Then she put away the spatial ring. Yi Xian laughed heartily. At this moment, Leng Xinxin suddenly extended her hand. What about mine? Yi Xian was speechless. You're really not holding back. Yi Xian looked at Leng Xinxin and smiled. Xinxin, I need you to do something for me. Leng Xinxin asked, what is it? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, I need you to return to the Sword Alliance. Leng Xinxin asked, for what? Yi Xian smiled, to bring things back. He had just obtained all the treasures of the entire ruins of Sword Sect, including all the cultivation methods and sword skills. These things were too suitable for the current Sword Alliance. Although the Sword Alliance was his father's, he was just a hands-off boss. He let the Sword Alliance roam freely. Therefore, the people of the Sword Alliance could only rely on themselves. Now, the cultivation methods and martial skills of the ruins of Sword Sect were extremely top-notch. If they were given to the Sword Alliance, it would definitely produce a large number of minor saints and even great saints. Currently, the strength of the ruins of Sword Sect was definitely above that of the great spiritual god palace. And the ruins of Sword Sect was obviously destroyed by the white-haired woman. Yi Xian sighed in his heart. The white-haired woman was the strongest swordsman he had seen so far, apart from his father, Qing, and his big brother. He felt that if the sword she used to challenge Qing had been aimed at the ancient god galaxy, the entire ancient god galaxy would have been destroyed. Unfortunately, the person she had challenged was Qing, the invincible Qing. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and handed a storage ring to Jianxin. I've already kept everything that suits me. Bring the rest to the Sword Alliance. Then tell Sword Maniac and Sword Ju to quickly improve. I have a lot of enemies in the ancient god galaxy. Ask them to help me fight in the future. Xiao Linlang was speechless. Jianxin glanced at Yi Xian. You're giving them all to the Sword Alliance? Yi Xian rolled his eyes at Jianxin. What do you mean? Do I still need to differentiate between the Sword Alliance and myself? Jianxin put away the storage ring. Take care. Then she turned and left. After a few steps, she seemed to have thought of something and stopped. Then she turned to look at Yi Xian. The sword you took out just now is not bad. Do you want to give it to me? Yi Xian was stunned. Then he took out the green profound sword. This one? Jianxin nodded. Do you want to give it to me? Yi Xian's face darkened. This woman actually wanted his green profound sword. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He pointed his finger and the green profound sword appeared in front of Jianxin. Jianxin did not stand on ceremony. She held the sword and waved it lightly. However, nothing happened. Jianxin frowned. What's going on? She held the sword as if it was an ordinary sword. Yi Xian smiled. When Qing forged this sword, he told me that only I can use it. Jianxin pouted. Then she threw the sword to Yi Xian. Remember, you still owe me a sword. Then she turned and flew away on her sword. Yi Xian suddenly said, there are many good swords in the storage ring. You can choose first. At the end of the horizon, Jianxin said, do I need you to tell me? Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Xiao Linlong's expression suddenly changed. She looked into the distance. A lot of people are coming. Yi Xian looked into the distance. Indeed, there were many powerful auras rushing over. Xiao Linlang said solemnly, without the suppression of Sword Dao willpower, anyone can enter this place. Yi Xian said, Miss Linlang, please cooperate with me later. Xiao Linlang looked at Yi Xian. What do you mean? Yi Xian suddenly punched himself in the chest. Pooh. Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of blood essence. Xiao Linlang was shocked. You, Yi Xian suddenly roared, Little Grotto Heaven, you actually stole all the treasures. With that, he punched himself in the chest again. Puff. Another stream of blood sprayed out. Xiao Linlong's jaw dropped as he watched on. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.